Hey guys, why?
Hey, what's up everyone? It's Dolbeck. Today I'm gonna play Path of Exile and probably go play Arc Raider after that. Maybe some Call of Duty, we'll see. I'm bored. I'm into the Mistfall Hunter waiting room. And I'm kind of waiting for Modern Warfare 4 too. I think that's gonna be pretty good. I was thinking about maybe going to try some game like Ion 2. But I feel like it's already late. I would say I'm thinking about all this. I feel like I need to restart making build. It was fun. I had a blast playing some MMORPG in PvP. So yeah, I need a game with a battleground or something.
Claypool here, and welcome back to the next.
Oh yeah, I wanted to see this video right there. I started it and it was pretty good. So I'm gonna rewatch it while gaming. Yeah. The dude Wyatt Claypool. Um, it's the type of dude at the start you're like, oh, it's just, maybe another nerd would just say what everyone is already saying. There's so many channels, right? Like, feel like they just say the same thing. It's the politic anyway. Every time there's a new, it's the same thing. But we need more, I think people would lean on the right side doing that. I should be doing that too, but I feel like it's better sometimes to listen to politic when someone is like better articulated, and I feel like this dude is since he's already English, he's probably way easier to listen than me, if you know what I mean. Oh, I forgot to change the picture, the thumbnail. Um, there you go. I changed the picture so at least it don't say Arc Raider, but I'm gonna probably play Arc Raider. All right. So let's see what he had to say. It was pretty good. He's roasting Carnita harder and harder, and I think Pierre Poliev need to start to do it. I think it's the good window time with all the mistake and the new tariff.
National Telegraph YouTube channel. My sincere hope is in this latest round of tariff threats by President Donald Trump that liberal Canadians finally learn the lesson that Prime Minister Mark Carney has no clue what he's doing. He doesn't know
Please.
how to deal with Trump, and in fact, he is already choking in response to the latest tariff threats. Check out this post that he made on his social media yesterday. I don't even need to read it to you. It's just prattle. He just kind of summarizes everything that has happened up to this point, and later on in the statement, he says, Canada believes in the benefits of free and fair trade, as evidenced by our new government signing more than 20 new economic and security partnerships. This trade dispute has raised costs for families, particularly in the U.S. Canada stands ready to engage intensively to address outstanding issues with the U.S. to the mutual benefit of our citizens. Okay,
Oh, I think I put it on the wrong browser. I might have advertisement in the middle of the thing, but it's fine. It's perfect. It's perfect. It's fine.
good. Why haven't we been doing any trade negotiating up to this point? They'll say that they have been at the table, but being at the table and actually dealing with the dispute is completely different. Notice how President Donald Trump did not choose to tariff the Mexicans today because President Claudia Sheinbaum knows how to play hardball. If Trump goes at her, she'll come back at him twice as hard, and they'll actually both mutually make concessions to try and come to an agreement where they're both at least somewhat
So you see, you speak about the leader in the Mexic that is a woman. And that woman trade better than Carney, so this is pretty bad, man. Carney is even worse than a woman when it's time to the negotiation and shit. That's crazy, man. Damn.
Satisfied. Donald Trump keeps kicking Canada not because he hates us. He is doing it because Mark Carney is like a broken vending machine that every time you kick it, you get a free soda. So of course Trump is going to keep kicking it. Carney keeps giving him concessions to make him go away. Carney keeps talking about how he wants a comprehensive trade agreement. He doesn't want a bunch of small agreements, so he's been pushing for a comprehensive one. Well, the Mexicans are getting that, and they're engaging directly with Trump. And for some reason, we keep making the excuse that we're not engaging directly or we're not taking the trade talks very seriously because we're waiting for a comprehensive plan. It's like, well, okay, good, but why since a year ago have you just been making small concessions here and there and not including them in a comprehensive plan? He's the one who keeps making small deals on the digital services tax, on the tripling of the streaming tax, on other tariffs we had on the United States that were not reciprocal previously.
Yeah, the thing is, while Carney does nothing about it, Trump just make a new way to make it worse for him, so he's gonna have to accept a worse deal. Every month it's getting worse. I wonder what's gonna be the deal. I'm pretty sure we're gonna lose a lot.
We also backed off on the Gordie Howe Bridge opening and gave them a 50-50 net revenue share in order to actually get it to open. All these things could have been rolled forward into saying, no what, okay, maybe we will make those concessions to you on all those issues. Many of those things I don't even exactly like, just as I don't like supply management. How about we package all that together and say, hey, you have about 5 or 6 small to moderate concessions that we'll make to you, and we want these few things for you, and let's get back to zero tariffs. I'd also throw in the China deal. I would burn the China deal in favor of a better deal with the United States. Then that would actually be kind of political genius by Carney if he only signed the China deal to then use it to trade up to a better deal with the Americans. But that's not what he's doing. He in fact likes his China deal. That's the funny thing. He refuses to touch certain things to use as concessions, but then he keeps making concessions on other things for nothing in return. It's absolutely maddening to watch. But now I want to take you to his press conference today, where he was talking to reporters about what he's willing to give up here, what his actual strategy is. And what you'll notice is he continues to say nothing. But before we get into that, I just want to remind you guys, if you like the show, make sure to leave a like on this video. If you're not yet a subscriber, make sure you hit the subscribe button. I'm still trying to get to 100,000 subscribers on this channel. And of course, leave a comment with what you think and consider hitting the join button if you want to become a monthly contributing member of the channel. And also, if you live in the city of Calgary, consider signing up on my link pinned at the top of the comments to my website, WyattClaypool.com, because I am planning on running for one of the UCP nominations for next year's Alberta provincial election. It's the riding of Calgary-Currie, although I don't expect everyone knows what specific riding they live in. Most people don't think about it. This riding is kind of a little bit closer to the city center in the southwest, so if you live there, sign up. And I'll also recommend good nomination candidates in other areas as well. Anyways, so let's get back to Mark Carney trying to seem like he's in control here.
When you caught off guard, you recently made concessions in regards to the Gordie Howe Bridge. You rolled back the digital services tax, the online streaming act. Are you going to make more concessions in order to get the Americans to the table?
We're at the table. We'll be having those more intense discussions. And what the issue has been for us has been a comprehensive agreement. We understand the U.S. approach to strategic sectors, what they call strategic sectors. They are strategic sectors, but under their definition, 232 definitions, that's aluminum, that's forest products, that's steel.
We already know that.
Pharmaceuticals, copper, others. But those first 4 being the most important for the Canadian economy. And that we don't want a partial agreement. We want something that addresses those sectors as well, so that is a viable approach going forward. In our view, and the view of Madame Scheinbaum and the Mexican authorities, there are solutions that evolve BISMA so that those sectors are globally competitive to the benefit of workers. Of course, we're working for workers in Canada first and foremost, but also workers across the other two economies.
But he's
Nah,
not,
he's
he's not
spitting
working
clear-
for workers here
Nah.
because he refuses to actually
Spitting
sign
lies.
the agreement. He keeps excusing it, saying, I want a comprehensive one. I don't want partial agreements. A partial agreement would be better than nothing right now. I wouldn't even mind getting a partial agreement than getting another partial agreement on another subject, and then you can kind of cobble them all together into one package later. But again, he keeps basically letting perfection be the enemy of good here. And you can't get perfection. When two people are negotiating, someone's not just going to get everything that they want and the other side's not going to get anything that they want. He was even asked in this press conference about the booze tariffs that a bunch of the provinces have in effect in places like Ontario, Manitoba, and
Yeah, what happened is more we wait, more we lose anyway. So even if we get a good deal or whatever, it's a bad deal because we waited too long. So we took some we paid during a long time.
British Columbia, if he supports it or not, and he couldn't even commit to whether he supports it or not. He just said that was their decision. And I thought the booze tariffs, the taking American booze off the shelves was always kind of a dumb idea. You know, you can use that as a certain aspect of hardball, and if you were going to use that, play hardball, saying, hey, we'll put it back on the shelves if you do this. That would be something. But every time we do stuff like this, it's like to thumb our nose generally at the Americans without actually demanding something in return. That's the problem. Gloria Sheinbaum, the president of Mexico, plays hardball. She wants this and she drives for it. And there's certain things that she maybe is willing to give up, but she makes it very clear that she's only going to give it up if they give her this or that. That is how she's been doing it. Carney talks abstractly. He's vague. He doesn't really commit to going hard after the U.S. to try and pressure them to the table because he doesn't even know what to do when he gets to the table. We are at the table, but we're not actually negotiating. That's why he's now only talking about intensifying discussions at this exact moment. It's so weak what we're doing. It took Trump, like, genuinely. I don't like the tariffs. But from Trump's perspective, probably, he's saying, this is the only way I can get Mark Carney to even take the trade talk seriously. He's just threatening him further, or he just sits there like a bump on the log because he's too scared to talk to me. Now I want to get to the press conference that Ontario Premier Doug Ford gave. Now, I don't really agree what he says here, but I at least can sort of strategically see that he's more competent on this issue than Mark Carney. A lot of this is kind of posturing and trying to sound tough against Trump, and it's probably good for his approval ratings and whatnot. But at the very least I'll give him, at least he somewhat signals the idea is that the way that you get to a deal, and he says he wants to get to a deal, is by basically matching their energy, their intensity. Now, I would actually say if Canada wants to put pressure on the Americans, you don't just put in place matching tariffs. You say, I'm going to put in 60% tariff on you. I'm going to go even harder and then put the pressure on you because you got midterm elections this year. But Doug Ford just basically says we should do reciprocal tariffs. It's like, Doug, they can handle the reciprocal tariffs better than we can. They have a better domestic economy and they're less reliant on us. So every time we try and do something to hurt them, other than hitting the bourbon industry in Kentucky, we're not really hitting them in any significant way that will get them to be more likely to sign a deal than us eventually caving. So they're willing to kind of handle the pressure we put against them because they know they can handle it, while we can't handle the current pressure they're putting against us. And yet we're trying to play the long game when we don't have the ability to do that.
I always say we can't keep rolling over for President Trump. We can't back down. We need a full Team Canada approach. Everything is on the table, but Ontario can't do it alone. We need the support. We need a plan from the Prime Minister to come in, and if these talks fail in 29 days, we need to hit them back as hard as we can. I'm tired of the bully trying to take our lunch money all the time. We always seem to be on our back heels. We need to be on the offense, not constantly on the defense with President Trump. We need to stand up to the bully, and we need to hit him tariff to tariff, all the way across the board. And that's my message to the Prime Minister. We need a plan moving forward.
Now, I do find it quite telling that in his statement, and I watched the whole thing, he over and over again talks about needing a deal and we need a plan, which implies that he knows that Prime Minister Carney doesn't have a plan. But he's feeling more pressure than probably Premier David Eby is, who we're about to get to in a second here, because the manufacturing sector in Ontario has been losing tens of thousands of jobs over time. And so he is under far more pressure to get a deal signed than David Eby, who has not been hit as hard. And what you'll see here is that David Eby's attitude is very much just trying to milk the situation for anti-American votes in British Columbia, because he basically acts like there's no, if the Americans don't like us, then, screw them, and we don't want anything to do with them anymore.
I'm not sure how the federal government reaches an agreement with an administration that, as far as I can tell, isn't talking to them. I don't see that the Americans have been engaging with Canada in trade conversations in any meaningful way.
Let's be very clear. He is lying here. David Eby is lying. There's a reason why the most trade information that Canadians have gotten when it comes to where the trade talks are come from Americans. It comes from Ambassador Pete Hoekstra. It comes from Jameson Greer, the U.S. trade representative. It comes from other people in American media, because our side will not tell anyone where we're at. Dominic LeBlanc won't. Prime Minister Mark Carney won't. Nobody else who's engaged in who is in the Foreign Affairs Department or specifically on the trade team has said anything. We even had Aaron O'Toole, the former Conservative leader, not a very good one, but he is on the committee or the council giving Mark Carney advice on trade. And they've been saying, well, if you want to get to an agreement, maybe you got to shred your China deal. Maybe you're going to have to make a concession on something like supply management, but then maybe you can get to zero tariffs on everything else, and that would be great. And even I very rarely agree with Aaron O'Toole, but he sounded frustrated, like Carney's been like stalling because he is too scared politically. He does not have the political courage to give up something like supply management, because the Liberals rely too much on supply management votes in Eastern Canada to get elected. And so we're effectively stalled out for a very particular political interest that the Liberals are, on allies with. And what we have here with David Eby is he's fibbing. He's just lying because he knows a lot of anti-American voters will be happy he's saying anti-American things. And that's the only way that he can probably try and boost back up his popularity, is by being the guy to say, well, if they don't want to trade with us, well then, what's even the point? They're not even engaging with us.
And so if the Americans come to the table to have a true discussion, I think that the federal government should absolutely be there. The Prime Minister and his team should be there. But if the Americans don't want to talk, and they want to impose tariffs like this, then all of our energy should be going to other places. The United States is a huge market that is impossible for Canada to replace. But at the end of the day, if they don't want Canadian goods, if they don't like Canada, there's not a lot we can do about that. So let's focus our energy on the places that are really excited to trade with us.
Yeah, like communist China, where they have 1 million Uyghur Muslims locked in concentration camps. Good idea, David.
And build up and take this generational opportunity so that our kids are not put in the same situation of being too dependent on the United States.
You can't not be too dependent on the United States if you yourself just said that they are impossible to replace. They are irreplaceable. It's not a generational opportunity. But obviously, David Eby, knowing that he probably has no effect on if a trade deal gets signed or not, is just going to take the super anti-Trump sort of position on all this. And Trump is not doing this because he dislikes Canada. I'm not saying he likes Canada. I'm saying he's probably ambivalent to Canada. He sees Carney as, like I said before, the vending machine that every time he kicks it, he gets a free product out of it. So he's kicking Canada while he's not kicking Mexico, because this stuff doesn't work on Mexico. It works on Canada because Carney is actually scared of the comprehensive trade negotiations. He doesn't want to be face-to-face with Trump and his team actually negotiating out this trade deal, because he's scared of not doing a good job at it or not living up to his extremely high expectations he set for himself. So to protect his ego, he's been refusing to actually engage in direct conversations and been making small concessions here and there just to kind of keep them from like demanding more from him. It's so pathetic watching this go down. But now I want to get to...
I'm not sure how the federal government reaches an agreement with an administration that, as far as like...
representative, I guess, of very anti-American Canadians. This is the kind of voters that the Carney liberals are kind of like playing for right now with their response. And actually, let's first start off with the CBC clip from David Cochran, making excuses effectively for the Carney liberals, basically playing up the narrative, oh my goodness, they were so impossible to deal with, and pretending as if all the concessions that Carney's been making up to this point don't reflect badly on him. It actually reflects badly on the Americans, if you think about it.
The U.S. posture has largely been, don't you dare stand up for yourself, we'll retaliate against your retaliation, and they sort of demand capitulation from Canada on a lot of issues. And when you look at the range of concessions that the federal government has made since Mark Carney became Prime Minister, on agreeing to split revenue earlier on the Gordie Howe Bridge, on dropping the digital services tax, on dropping the order by the CRTC to force U.S. streaming companies to pay more for Canadian content. Well, Jameson Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative, said at a conference in Aspen last week that Canada gets no credit for any of those concessions, that essentially if you take a bad decision and create a bad situation, you don't get credit for cleaning up your mess. So that's the dynamic they're dealing with.
No. That's not the dynamic coming from the United States. That's the dynamic that Mark Carney helped create, because he keeps making concessions on things like the DST and the Gordie Howe Bridge and other reciprocal tariffs we had, and increasing our military spending and not rolling that into the comprehensive trade deal that he says he wants. Carney sucks at this. That is the thing that people need to realize. Now, I want to jump over to former NDP MP Charlie Angus reacting to this, because this is truly like an unhinged response from him. But it shows you, I think, what Charlie Angus really represents is like the id of many kind of left-wing Canadians and how they think about the situation. You will think this is delusional because what he's about to say is delusional.
I think it would be a lot better, Ben, for Donald Trump, just to be honest, and impose a massive fee on Canada and declare that it's the rent that he's charging for the amount of time we spent living inside his head. Because he's obviously obsessed with us. He hates us, but he's also gutless. So this tariff thing tonight, I think everybody in Canada are saying, what? He's coming after us for hockey sticks? Is that the big threat? And the fact that he's imposing this 1930 tariff, anybody who knows a little bit of history knows that 1930 Tariff Act plunged the United States into the world into the worst economic catastrophe ever. They had to pull that one out of the crypt to come after us.
The funny thing there with his reference to the Smoot-Hawley tariffs of 1930 that Hoover instituted and Franklin Delano Roosevelt kept is that leftists like Charlie Angus from the very labor-heavy NDP, they used to be in favor of the Smoot-Hawley tariffs. They used to celebrate it as a major part of like the New Deal in the United States to protect workers, but suddenly Trump's implementing tariffs and leftists realize that tariffs are finally bad. What is he talking about? Oh, well, he's trying to take money back from us for all the time we spent living rent-free in his head. Okay, Charlie, I guess Charlie, yeah, I guess he is. He hates us and he's gutless. Sorry, what's gutless about what he's doing? If anything, it would be gutless to give massive concessions to Donald Trump in exchange for nothing. Mark Carney is the one who is gutless here. He is the one who keeps choking every time the pressure comes onto him from Donald Trump on these trade issues. Not because Trump hates us again. He's ambivalent to us, and he keeps getting benefits every time he does what he does. So why wouldn't he continue doing it? But you have these people just living in like this weird space in their head where they have convinced themselves that Trump is really scared of us, and that all the kind of elbows up type positioning is making Canada like, I don't know, stronger. I don't even know what he's even trying to get at. Like somehow all of this just demonstrates how, like, I actually don't know. I'm genuinely at a loss for words for what Charlie Angus is even trying to get at. It really just turns into Trump sucks. Trump's a coward because I said he's a coward. It doesn't matter that our prime minister is the one who keeps conceding to him. He's a coward. We're living rent-free in his head. He hates us, and Canadians are sitting around saying, oh, he's coming after us for hockey sticks? People are losing their jobs, idiot. People are actually hurting because of all this. I'm sorry that retired people like Charlie Angus, who like to vote left simply because it makes them feel good about themselves, that they're having a good time trying to make fun of Donald Trump and sitting on their podcasts, talking about how Orange Man bad. But there are people in the manufacturing sector losing work right now, not being able to pay rent because Carney won't take action. But apparently it would actually be a bad thing if Carney took action, because then it would stop this sort of like fantasy world scenario that that people like Charlie Angus have worked up in their heads, that we're fighting back against the Americans like it's the Third World War, and they're on the front lines of fighting back against MAGA by making these just cringe level podcasts. Anyways, I do want to just quickly.
I would hate that they start doing something good now, because we wasted so much time and money for that, and at the same time, I just want conservatives to win, man.
Jump to this comment that this liberal shill on X had made, Gatorgum, who says Donald Trump is violating Kuzma and reneging again on trade deals. Tell us again, this is on Carney though. Tell us again how you side with Trump and this blatant disregard for the very deal he negotiated and signed. I'm sorry, but Canada actually last year was the country that for months had tariffs on goods that were actually covered under Kuzma. We actually violated the agreement first. Now, I'm not saying that.
Yep.
I'm saying that they should be allowed to do it because we did it. But this is on Carney. This is on Carney, though, because he has set the precedent that every time this happens, he gives something up. Now, I want to go to the response that Shavloy Majumdar and some of the conservative ministers, the minister critics, had come out with. I thought their take on all this was actually quite good, the way that they're handling the whole thing. So in just a second here, I'm going to pull this up. My goodness, X has been annoying me so much recently. Every time I try and pull up clips now, everything autoplays as I scroll by with noise, and it's maddening because it's just horrible to listen to as I'm trying to pull things up. It'll even sometimes play clips over other clips that I don't even have on screen. Okay, so here we have the response from the conservatives here. Or no, I need to pull it up in just a second here. That wasn't the right one. In 1 second, I'll have it up. Okay, I had to pause there, but I did find the statement. So here is the statement that was posted by Shavloy Majumdar, the conservative critic for U.S.-Canada relations. But this was in conjunction with other ministers like Eric Duncan and Stephanie Kusi and others. But I just want to jump down a little bit later into their statement here, because they start off on the right tone saying, hey, the tariffs are unacceptable. What else are they going to say? Obviously, they're not going to support the tariffs here. But I think that they take a turn in their statement a little bit later on, and this is the exact right position the conservatives should be taking. Because I think previously the conservatives were too conciliatory to the Carney liberals. Oh, well, we need to rally around the liberal government because it would seem too pro-American of us if we didn't. It's like, but if they suck, if they're not doing their jobs properly, you absolutely are justified in not backing their play when their play is not working. So here in their statement, Shavloy and the other critics say, 14 months ago, Prime Minister Mark Carney described the breakdown in our relationship with the United States as the worst economic crisis since the Second World War. He was right. Canada is in a major crisis, and despite making promises to Canadians to secure a deal, the Liberals are failing to meet the moment with the urgency it deserves. Liberals have failed to explain anything to Canadians, obscuring transparency and relying on ad hominem attacks on the opposition. President Trump is wrong to target Canadian workers and must reverse these tariffs immediately, and Mark Carney was wrong to surrender Canada's leverage for over a year and a half without actually working to secure the deal he promised. And then it says, conservatives will fight for workers and a strong economy, but that's what the conservatives need to keep pressing on, is that Carney keeps making concessions for nothing. We have zero leverage. That is why Trump is going after us this way. So if you're angry at Trump, you should be doubly mad at Mark Carney for effectively incentivizing the behavior that's been going on that pretty much every other world leader has been able to stave off by not being cowards, by actually coming out of their trenches and engaging directly and earning Trump's respect. Not that his respect is the thing that we should value most, and we should sit around like sitting up late at night just marveling at how he likes us. It doesn't really matter. the point is, though, that at the end of the day, Trump is just playing a game. If he is getting something by acting the way he is, he's going to do it. And unless you actually concoct a proper plan to get to a deal, this will keep happening. That doesn't mean that you have to make concessions all over the place. It means a lot of things. It means rhetorical hardball. It means making threats. It means making concessions, but with very clear demands on the other side that if I make this concession, you have to give me this. You can actually get to a situation where a deal is signed, where Trump feels like he won, but at the same time, you got a lot more back than you expected to because you played your cards right. But Carney refuses to play any cards because he's scared of looking like he got outplayed. So to protect his ego, more than 17,000 people in the manufacturing sector in Ontario just lost their jobs in the last couple of months. But good job, man. I hope it was all worth it, Carney. And I hope it's worth it to all the liberals to have people who are still in the working age losing all their jobs just so that you can basically tell your friends how much you don't like Donald Trump over brunch. Well, whatever. With all that being said, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, consider hitting the join button and becoming a member of the channel. And if you live in Alberta, sign up onto my nomination recommendation list on my website pinned at the top of the comments, WyattClaypool.com. And
I like this man more and more. Not that I like man, you know, but
After this interview, I was threatened with legal action and told my career would be ruined if I... So here it is. All right, let's see it.
Hi, I'm Sandy. My pronouns are she, her. I am here representing for Mammies for Trans Rights today. We have just come into the park. We're very hot and sweaty and tired and full of emotional because the streets were full of joy for our trans kids. So our group is about stepping out for standing up for our kids, because the political landscape is heinous, and we, our two co-founders, neither of whom are here today unfortunately, Claire and Karen, they decided that they needed to do something, and so we all formed, and year on year, month on month, there's more and more of us coming together across Ireland in all of the Pride marches and protests.
A bunch of white women virtue signing in, like thinking they are better than other because they are doing something for the community that no one wants to grow.
This summer, we're nearly in every one of them. So we're going around spreading love, spreading the joy of being parents who can love and stand up for our kids.
And do your members have trans kids?
Some do, some don't. So some are allies. Some people don't have children at all. So to be a Mammies for Trans Rights and participate in this group is about loving all of our kids and giving all of our children, wherever you're from and whatever you look like and whatever your gender and your identity and sexuality is.
Holy shit.
That is all of our
Someone
kids.
say
So
Satan offspring, bro.
you don't actually have to be a parent at all to be participating, and we have loads
She's
of
not a parent,
So we've got the
I'm pretty
baddies,
sure.
we got the moms, the uncles.
The kid is running around with the oppression flag on. Oh
the
my
grands,
god.
the dads, the nibblings, the siblings.
Jesus.
All of these people.
And can I ask you what you think of the puberty blocker trial over in the UK at the minute? There's a lot of pushback against it.
I think it's a really difficult conversation. I think they give puberty blockers to kids who are having
How is this allowed? 'Cause
early
we allow
puberty
it.
anyway.
We let them do it.
I don't know why it's different when it's a trans person.
Yeah.
And that's where I think if this is a mechanism that's going to keep a kid alive rather than not, as an intervention.
Let me change my gender or I'm going to kill myself. Oh, right. Yeah, that's called a mental disorder.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
you
if
gotta,
you wanna kill
you
your-
gotta encourage them, bro, that into their mental disorder and make it worse.
yourself as a kid, you need to be committed to a mental institution.
You know, why
What
not?
are we
Why wouldn't
doing?
we do that when we do that to another 8-year-old who's having early puberty? And this is where that
8-year-old?
medication comes from, right?
Yeah.
So why wouldn't that be different?
Oh my
I think it is
God.
quite different. Like if in the CAS report it says that puberty blockers are likely to cause things like osteoporosis within young
Yeah.
children
I
and
mean, the
stunts.
CAS report has been debunked by many scientists at this point. So I don't think it's something that we need in Ireland to bring in and stand over. I think we need to do Irish research for our Irish.
See, I think that the moment that these people make an appeal to a to like an authority, like, oh, it's been debunked, I wish that they would ask follow-up questions like, well, what if it did cause these things? Like, would you still support it? And the answer actually for all of these people, that they'll meander around it, but the answer is actually yes. So while they do try to use the authority as a justification, they don't require a justification. They would do it anyway.
Yeah, but it could be asking her, okay, what's your source? Like, tell me where you find that source. Is it like, if you tell me it's debunked, you need to have good source to be able to say that.
And for all of our people who live here,
Not
I think there
Facebook.
is a fair amount of research available and people doing research in this country that we can look to the best models of healthcare. So, for instance, I know people who are going to Iceland to look at their model of healthcare just because they're our neighbouring country who
Isn't Iceland subsidized by Denmark? Iceland's massively subsidized by Denmark.
have a model of healthcare that is failing significantly the trans community. I don't think that's the place to look, and I don't think we need to import that here.
That's Greenland? Oh, sorry. No, you're right. That is Greenland. Excuse me. I was wrong.
Honest, you know?
Prior to the CAS report, there was countries like Sweden stopped prescribing puberty blockers to children because they seen it was doing a lot of damage. What do you make of that?
Isn't it crazy that Leif Erikson actually... Wasn't he the one that named it? 700 years later, he's still getting people. He's still getting them. That's crazy.
Sure. I mean, I'm not a scientist or a medical person. I'm a parent. And, like, my job as a parent is to advocate for my child's safety and life.
Oh yeah, I want to advocate for trans rights and be there at every protest, but I'm not doing research about trans rights. Like, I'm not doing research about like how trans get affected by any of this. All I do is positivity. I share positivity. I'm a good person.
If puberty blockers might lead to osteoporosis down the line versus a dead child really soon, I know where I'm going to go.
There's also another study that shows that after someone transitions, the suicide rate actually goes up. So the argument that, you know, a dead child or a trans child doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Well, there's significant studies that would say, like the Trevor Project will say that one adult in a trans life who stands beside them significantly reduces the suicide likelihood. So, I mean, I guess, like, again, I'm not a scientist, I'm a parent. So
Yeah, but it work with trans and non-trans. Like, our statistic doesn't work because if your parents are closer, it's gonna just help you even if you're not trans. So it's a balanced statistic between not gender, but
what I know about science is that we can probably take science to show whatever we want to if we want to be biased to something.
whatever we want
These
to.
people don't actually give a shit about science. Whenever they quote studies, whenever they say, oh, well, this is what's proven, they don't actually care about that. They think that you care about that. That's why they're saying it. These people are weird freaks that want to genetically change children. They should be put in a fucking prison. So really, you have to keep in mind that every time they try to make a play for rationality or scientific method or anything like that, they only do this in the process of trying to basically skinwalk your ideology against you to allow them to do whatever disgusting weird shit they're trying to do.
And I mean, it's to each
don't
parent's
really care
prerogative,
about
right?
science.
Of how they decide, how they bring their kid in, how they talk with their kid, how they engage in informed consent and advocating for their child, with their child, of their child. And I mean, that's a really individual. It's each parent for what their priorities are and how they live in their lives and their families. I wouldn't say that it is.
if your girl or your boy is not happy to be his gender, like if your girl don't like to be a girl, that mean you make her live the what's a girl experience wrong. She should focus on trying to make her do girly things, so at least she know what is it before hating it. I don't know, man. If your kid turn lesbian, and I don't know, and you push them that way, that's crazy, dude.
An overarching, this is what must be done or not be done. But we need some healthcare in this country for our trans kids, because currently we have none.
Yeah, you do. It's called a mental institution, and you need to be in it with them too. The kid and the parent needs to be in it. The kid needs to be in an institution so they can be rehabilitated from the abuse that they had to deal with from the parent, and the parent needs to be in the mental institution because they wanted to mutilate a child. It's actually really simple. I agree.
As my goal for
You know,
president.
you're looking at extensive wait lists to the point that they're like non-available, right?
Well, wouldn't a good argument for that be because it's become such a social trend, like onset rapid gender dysphoria becoming?
No, I don't think so.
thing?
No, I don't think so.
You don't?
No.
Even though the numbers for trans children has skyrocketed in recent years.
No.
So why do you think the numbers have grown so significantly?
I would say probably things like more language available, more education. You know, in the 80s, there was, I don't know how many people in this field were queer and didn't have the language for it. And maybe it's like not too different to that, you know? And maybe there's a safety mechanism of people understanding that I can come out, or I didn't come out because I didn't have the safety, I didn't have the household, there wasn't the space for me, or I didn't have the words.
But children as young as 8 and 10, they don't really have the capability to understand that language in the first place, so people understand them now.
I think they do. I think they do know things. I think
She thinks that kids understand the nature of being gay and being trans, and they understand the political ramifications of it, and they have like fucking three-dimensional reasoning of like why it would be more okay to come out as trans now versus before. Like, I'm sorry, but like if you're a parent and you have an 8-year-old kid and you think that your kid is trans and you're dressing them in the other gender's clothes and you're trying to get them on puberty blockers and stuff, you need to have that kid taken away from you, and you need to be brought up on charges for child abuse. This is an insane, disgusting thing, and the fact that we're allowing people to do this at all will be looked at historically as an evil. It is an evil that we are allowing. Like, we need to immediately shut these people down, and we need to do so in a way that is punitive. It's not enough to simply remove the problem. We have to punish the people who created it. It's
and some people would say that he does hate speech, but man, I just want, like, I wish it was working like this, bro. Like, damn, bro, this is damn.
Thing and it's sick. Yeah, these people, they're basically pedophiles.
people are really disparaging sometimes of children, and like, I mean, if we're running around and we've got like people giving baby grows to a little boy, being like, I'm whatever, and then on a little girl, their little thing is I'm so cute and kiss me and all this. I mean, it's the same, but in a different, it's dressed up differently, right?
Yeah,
You know?
well, I suppose so, but like if I had a son who was like 2 years old and I put him in...
The difference is that, like, they're actually a boy, though, right? Because they're born a biological male. So, like, that's kind of like a pretty big difference, though, right? Because, like, you know, you're going to get a boy clothes for boys because he's actually a boy. Like, I feel like that's a pretty big, like, little fine point there.
Think, saying, I'm a girl, whatever. It wouldn't actually be a girl, though.
No, that's not what I'm talking about.
No? Oh.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that we emblazon and we live our lives surrounded in a heteronormative patriarchy. And so those social norms are projected on...
You know what the fact is? The fact that this stupid, retarded Karen is able to go out and talk about this proves that we're not living in a patriarchy. Because the patriarchy that I dream of would never allow a person like this to do this. I wish you were right. I do. I wish you were right. And back when you were actually right, the world was a better place.
To children without the children having any consent to that anyway. And so how is that not...
This is also, and this is another really big component to like what their ideology is that biological realities, children can't...
child who has the language to say, this is how I'm feeling today, this is how I'm feeling tomorrow. Why don't they have the language? I mean, if our job as parents is to lead and inform and educate and listen to our kids. If they're going to tell us something, certainly to my mind, from my job as a parent in my house, this is the only place that it matters to me. It's my job in my house to listen to my child, and it's another parent's job.
Well, why don't you just give them infinite candy? Why not, like, whenever your kid says, I don't want to exercise, I just want to sit all day and watch TV and sit on the iPad and eat gummy worms for every single meal, why aren't you giving him gummy worms? Why are you telling them that he has to go to bed at a certain time? So why is it that, for example, a child can't make a decision on what they want to eat on a day-to-day basis? They can't make a decision on when they need to go to sleep on a day-to-day basis. They can't make a decision on, you know, like what they're going to wear to school, but they can make a decision on their gender? How does that make any sense? There's no reasoning to this at all. Why would you default to an 8-year-old's judgment or viewpoints on something as important as their gender? It doesn't make any sense.
In their house.
Good morning, everybody. It's July 21st, 2026. Hope you're doing great wherever you're tuning in from. This footage that we're seeing right here, F-35s and F-16s running precision strike packages over Iranian airspace while CENTCOM's targeting network is tracking Iranian ballistic missiles in real time. F-35, F-16, this is night 10. 10 consecutive nights on time, on target, boom, right there. Every single time. Ballistic missiles going up in flames, and that's the big thing right now. Crush Iran's ballistic missiles and drone inventory, as we're seeing in this latest round of strikes. You can see deep mountain bunkers where they're trying to conceal this. This is their whole goal. Conceal, camouflage, try to hide as many ballistic missiles and drones as possible from CENTCOM. But here's what the IRGC wants you to know, because obviously their rhetoric machine is on full blast. They did fight back, though. They launched ballistic missiles and drones at U.S. military positions, and they're saying that they hit places in Kuwait, Bahrain, Jordan, radar sites. But here's another thing they're saying that is just wild. They're saying that they took out and destroyed an Amazon primary data center infrastructure in Bahrain. Amazon. They basically took a shot at the cloud. We know a few months ago they threatened to snip undersea fiber optic cables that connected the Middle East to the rest of the world. So again, this is just economic espionage and strikes that Iran wants to do to cause pain on the world's economy and to seep into the corporate world, where they're going to try to make the pain hard on corporate entities. But CENTCOM had an answer. The IRGC declared war on Amazon, and then CENTCOM responded. They're like, 2-day delivery? No, we'll go ahead and give you a prime 24-hour upgrade for free. And then here's what this footage is all about, taking place across Iran right now. Some of this footage is wild. Seeing IRGC headquarters go up in flames, obviously the ballistic missile centers go up in flames, and Iran flexed one of their drone underground networks just a couple days ago, and the reports are coming in saying that that was struck immediately after. So that was at Tabriz Air Base, and just yesterday reports are coming in saying that Tabriz was absolutely crushed by CENTCOM. So Iran's flexing. They're like, oh, check out my new rides, check out my new drones, and CENTCOM's like, oh, cool, yeah, we're going to put you on the next episode of CENTCOM Response. I think that's what the TV show would be called if CENTCOM was making a show. They're basically responding immediately when the IRGC flexes something, and that's exactly what's going on right now. And then get this. This is wild. Iran is now begging, absolutely pleading and begging and panicking to Qatar, Egypt, to submit a ceasefire proposal on their behalf. They're like, yeah, make it look like it's you guys that want the ceasefire. But the reports I'm seeing are Qatar, Egypt, and Pakistan, the ones that have kind of come in and been on Iran's side. You know, we saw the Prime Minister of Qatar turn his back on J.D. Vance. There's probably some weird connections going on there, but looks like nothing is letting up. 10 nights, 50,000 American service members in the region right now. But there's a big fork in the road. The next 72 hours, will we see an off-ramp taken, or will we see the pressure just ramped up even further? And then stay for the roundup section, because Ukraine just added a 413th new drone system of the year, and Anduril dropped something that is wild. This is going to change the game for Army Strike Aviation. It's called the Thunder. This is a little clip of it right here, but we're going to talk about this technology, how amazing it is. That'll happen about 3/4 of the way through the video. And then before we go any further, I want to honor the fallen, the national treasures that were taken out by Iran recently. The Army did release the names and images of 2 of those soldiers, and it's First Lieutenant Tyler James Feehan, 25, of Iwa Beach, Hawaii, and Private Isabella Gonzalez, 19, of Carrollton, Texas. RIP, they will never be forgotten, and thoughts and prayers with their family, friends, and with their units. All those that are still in the units, that are still out there fighting, just know all of us back at home have your back, and what you're doing, continuing on in their honor, is the most virtuous thing, and we are so proud of you. Thank you so much for continuing to represent your fallen well with your service. We got your back. But let's talk about what just happened, because if we rewind about 14 hours, it gives us a big picture about how this is unfolding. So it opened at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, July 20th, when CENTCOM launched Night 10. F-35s, F-16s, warships, precision munitions hitting Iranian command centers, maritime capabilities, missile and drone sites, and air defense systems all across Iran. Strikes were said to have concluded at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, so while CENTCOM was still egressing airspace, the IRGC was preparing their press releases, and they said just prior or during, they were launching IRGC missiles and drones at the different sites that we just talked about. And they're claiming that they're hitting radar sites because the US military is absolutely crushing their radar sites. So Iran is trying to say, oh yeah, you're crushing our sites, so we're crushing yours as well. Obviously, Iran can get a lucky ballistic missile through. We've seen that happen, unfortunately. But neither the United States, Bahrain, nor Amazon has confirmed the claim yet that the Amazon HQ was actually struck. But I came across this article that says Iran targeted Amazon infrastructure in Bahrain, U.S. military sites in Jordan, the IRGC claims. So they actually targeted it. Their whole goal was to target it. They're saying they blew it up, but that doesn't mean they actually hit it. So we have no confirmation that it's actually been hit yet. But we do have confirmation that CENTCOM executed Night 10, and also vessel transits through the Strait of Hormuz continue. 900 vessels facilitated by CENTCOM so far over the last few months. That's about 450 million barrels of crude moved since early May. The IRGC is calling their strikes radar clearing, and CENTCOM's basically just showing up with the longest receipt of Iranian radars that Iran's ever seen. And we're going to get into the platforms as well, the F-35s, the F-35A, C, and B that are executing strikes all across Iran right now. But before we do that, I want to talk to you about what it takes to be locked on as a fighter pilot flying in one of those jets. And that's exactly why I made maxafterburnerenergy.com. We've got nootropics, natural caffeine, and the whole goal is to just keep you focused all day long without that dreaded caffeine crash or weird heartburn feeling that some energy drinks give. I remember drinking and chugging energy drinks prior to combat missions or air shows because fighter jets don't have cup holders, and it just made my stomach hurt, and I had an energy crash about 30 to 45 minutes later. So we specifically formulated Max Afterburner Energy to not give you that crash. We did it with L-theanine, natural caffeine, and nootropics that keep you locked on all day long, just like a fighter pilot. So head to maxafterburnerenergy.com, sign up for our email list. Our cans are going to be produced here soon in the next couple months, but if you sign up for the email list, you'll get discounts. As soon as they come out, you'll be the first to be notified, and we've got merch coming as well. Check out this A10 shirt. I'm so excited about it. This will be up hopefully within the week. We're working on getting it up as fast as possible. And then when you join the email list, you'll get a weekly update from me of all the different content, and you can click it and see the different videos that come out throughout the week, so you never miss anything on the Max Afterburner USA channel or even on the Max Afterburner podcast channel. So go to maxafterburnerenergy.com, join our email list. I think you'll really get a lot out of it. Thanks so much for the support with the energy drinks. And now I want to tell you about the platforms that are uniquely suited for this situation. So we're seeing high-res ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. So that could be MQ-9s. It could also be teamed up with F-35s that are actually doing the ISR themselves, because the F-35 has such a great sensor platform. It actually has a system that allows the pilot to see through the skin of the aircraft as they're flying. So just an incredible fighter jet. And the fact that CENTCOM is flexing that thing with that massive afterburner. Maybe that's the next title change for the channel, coming soon, Massive Afterburner. Pretty cool name. But you're seeing CENTCOM flex that afterburner because the F-35 is the real workhorse right now, making sure that they can go in, crush these missile sites, get ISR, team up with the F-16 CJ that we just saw, the Wild Weasel. That thing is built to go in and hunt these surface-to-air missile systems and the ballistic missile systems. Remember, we see the footage, we see the actual imagery of these different sites across Iran. Hundreds, if not thousands of bunkers, hundreds of locations where you can see how dispersed they've put their ballistic missiles and their drones for exactly this type of situation. I mean, they've just been building their war machine for decades, but the F-35 and the F-16 CJ have a little something to say about that, because they're the ones that are going in and they'll be the ones to keep Iran, whether they hit the data center or not. These jets will be the one to keep them from doing it. And even with the F-18s now showing that they're launching air-launched cruise missiles, those Alchem's. Air-launched cruise missiles, incredibly capable. You're looking at about 1,000-pound warhead on those things. And the beauty of those is the standoff ranges. Because what Iran's likely doing is protecting their ballistic missiles with surface-to-air missiles, as many as they possibly can. So if you have that air-launched cruise missile, now you can release it from dozens of miles away and then let it go in and strike the surface-to-air missile systems, the radars, clear the path, and then you can get targeting information from the F-16 CJ with information being pumped across the network so everybody's on the same page. The capability of the interoperability is just huge. Think of the Aegis system in the naval ships right now that are executing the blockade. The fact that that Aegis system gives the ability for those ships to all talk to each other, transmit information to fighter jets. I mean, this is the best wingman of them all. Basically, the network that connects all the different fighter jets. This is the sixth man of the basketball team that's actually allowing these strikes to take place. It's just awesome to see how connected everything is, how well everything can talk to each other, and that gives the fighter pilots the lethal ability to prosecute these ballistic missiles as we're seeing in this footage right here. But yeah, when you look at the imagery, we do it on a lot of the live streams that I do, the imagery is wild when you look and see the hundreds of different sites that Iran has built with their $500 million a day of oil revenue coming mainly from China. They've basically just taken that immediately, put it on their IRGC visa and just swiped it to get ballistic missiles. I mean, it's just crazy the amount of infrastructure that they've been able to build over time. And this is what happened when action isn't taken against a regime like this. They just continuously build like a cancer. They just develop into something that becomes massive. And at some point, you couldn't actually do anything about it. But CENTCOM's response to the Amazon claim was basically
like
to release F-35 and F-16 strike footage. And that strike footage basically gave them a free membership to Prime. But in this case, the Prime is brought to you by the F-35. But let's talk honestly about what the adversary has right now, the honesty check, right? The IRGC is graded, the IRGC is not disarmed. They demonstrated last night that they can still generate a multi-front missile and drone campaign hitting multiple locations, with reports coming in that they still have close to 2,000 ballistic missiles left. They're saying that they're doing a radar clearing operation. So a military force running a genuine seed campaign doesn't announce it publicly in advance. Tactical surprise is the entire premise of suppression of enemy air defenses. So they're saying they're doing a seed mission with ballistic missiles, where really there's a big gap here, because the ability to move and adjust real time as radars, surface-to-air missiles move and adjust, most of these systems are mobile. So them saying they're going to target it at all with their ballistic missiles, there's a snowball's chance in hell of that happening. But this isn't a seed doctrine, it's information warfare. So the IRGC's operational security has likely completely collapsed under 10 nights of communications infrastructure strikes, which CENTCOM has been systematically decimating. And decimation out there means to reduce by 1/10, and it comes from the gladiator days. They'd put gladiators in groups of 10, or the Roman army, they'd put them in groups of 10, the most hard soldiers of them all, and then they would turn 9 of them against the weak one and cleanse that 10th one. That's where decimation came from. That's why they're trying to get this 10-day ceasefire. They think the U.S. is just going to agree again and be tapped along by the IRGC. So hopefully, in my opinion, the U.S. administration doesn't give them that off-ramp, because you give your enemies an off-ramp when they're actually in good faith and they actually deserve it, or they at least have the ability to accept it. That's when the off-ramp makes sense from the art of war. The the off-ramp doesn't make sense if it's just the enemy trying to trick you again and say, hey, let's get a ceasefire. We promise we won't do anything wrong. No, it's like that fool me once quote. You know, you fool me once, shame on you. You fool me twice, shame on me. If you observe the enemy being deceptive and using ceasefires against you, then you don't give them that off-ramp. But you made it to the Global Roundup, my friends, because something insane just happened with Anduril. You gotta check this out. So, quick review of what Anduril actually released. It's called the Thunder, and it's gonna change Army aviation. It's just so cool to see this thing. Look at it, I mean, the operator flying what looks to be an Apache, and then controlling the different drones around him, like having different wingmen. And these are VTOLs as well. So you can see that the blades rotate down, and then this thing has drones of its own. So again, force multiplication means basically having something that can then do the job of 15, 20, 30 different helicopters. Look at them. They're targeting radar sites, surface-to-air missile sites, and then you have that big wave. So this is something you have in fighter aviation too. You have different waves. So just seeing this operation take place is awesome. And I'll do a full breakdown on this, maybe a full video on the Thunder and follow-on videos. But I thought that was just awesome to see. And then remember, Ukraine is now at the leading edge of adapting and adjusting their drones. They've even got a drone that could be on a boat, drive up to a beach, release a 50 cal onto the beach that can then start hitting Russian positions. So when it comes to technology like the Thunder, like the advanced drones that we're seeing, a lot of this is being used in Ukraine, kind of the test bed for this type of amazing technology. All right, you made it to the 40 chess strategic analysis section, my friends. So let's talk about the board where it actually sits. So the IRGC is running supposedly a radar clearing operation. Really, their biggest operation is an off-ramp operation. They want Qatar, Egypt, and Pakistan to propose that ceasefire, and they want all of them to pressure the United States into that ceasefire. So they're trying to show leverage by hitting the Amazon Center, if they actually did, by hitting the different radar sites, and then get the ceasefire so that they can basically catch their breath. So you can see here, their whole goal is to try to show strength militarily while just basically begging the rest of the Middle East to get them that ceasefire so they can rebuild and so they can tap along the world yet again. Because it looks like the ceasefire proposal actually includes a provision that would allow ships to freely flow through the Strait of Hormuz on the southern and central routes. So that's probably another reason why at least the IRGC wouldn't agree to it. So if the leaders up in Tehran actually sign some sort of a ceasefire again, Vahidi and the hardliners down in the Strait of Hormuz likely won't agree to it, and we'll just be back where we were last week before these strikes even took place. What do you think? Do you think we should give them an off-ramp again? Give them the ability to tap along the world again? Do you think that these strikes will continue for another 10, 20 days? Do you think that the war will just continuously ramp up? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Would love to read what you have to say. Go ahead and follow me on X, follow me on Instagram. I'm posting there pretty much every day. And then pop over to maxafterburnerenergy.com and just join the email list. It's totally free. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you watching the video. See you in the next video that pops up right here. This is Ryan, also known as
CTV News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. A bridge built to bring Canada and the United States together will now open against the backdrop of a growing trade war. Ottawa has canceled plans for a joint celebration just days before the Gordie Howe International Bridge opens. Instead, Canada will hold its own ceremony Friday, as the federal government said a binational party would be inappropriate. This in light of President Donald Trump's latest tariff threats. The bridge remains scheduled to open Monday, though the Associated Press reports some U.S. officials are now less certain about that timeline. Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkens says the focus should remain on getting the long-awaited crossing up and running.
The Prime Minister made a deal that I think he thought was sensible in the environment that we're in. I'm happy that he made the deal, because it's preposterous to think that we have a fully completed bridge that we've paid for just sitting there unable to open.
Trump's latest tariff threats cover hundreds of Canadian products, including wine. So what does that mean for Essex County's wine industry? CTV's Robert Lothian took to the county to go to vineyards, joining us tonight with what he's learned. Robert, I bet the answer isn't what some might expect.
Yeah, Travis, that's right. Winemakers in Essex County say this news won't sour business in the region or really across Ontario at all. The Trump government's taking aim at the industry with these new 50% tariffs. But in reality, producers I spoke with say the U.S. makes up very little, if any, of their business. In a large number of new sweeping tariffs, Canada's winemakers have seemingly found themselves in the crosshairs of the U.S. government.
My first reaction was I was incredulous.
But
In the
shop
crosshairs.
co-owner Tom O'Brien isn't one of concern.
Because there's hardly any wine shipped out of Canada into the United States. It's kind of a, tit for tat because California wine isn't on the shelves.
The U.S. president's threats include a 50% levy on wines heading stateside. It's a market O'Brien said is hard to
Imagine
profit in
refusing
for
to
many
have
producers.
Californian
Notoriety,
wine. That's
acceptance,
crazy, dude.
Familiar with the name. And there's probably a 30-year-old perception that Ontario wines aren't very good, and that's not true anymore.
The move is in part a response to many provinces pulling U.S. spirits and wines from the shelves more than a year ago, a decision lawmakers in the states say is causing harm to their producers. According to the Ontario Craft Wineries Association, the new counter tariffs won't cause that same harm here in our province.
The truth is that there's not a lot of wine that's sold into the U.S. And so if there's not much to tariff, then there's not much to lose.
Sprucewood Shores President Steve Mitchell says his Essex County winery previously sold to one state, but stopped when tariffs were first announced.
There was probably not the environment to be trying to pitch Canadian wine into the U.S. at that point. And we just agreed that it was a good time to kind of stop working on that. And in light of today's news, I'm glad that we did.
Province-wide, Mitchell says the industry is actually seeing growth.
There is an element of the products not being available, and so people searching for new alternatives. And then the largest part of why Ontario wines are doing so well is the increased shelf space allocations in grocery and convenience.
For O'Brien and Cooper's Hawk, tariffs or not, the focus remains on helping Essex County grow its winemaking footprint.
It's not a threat because it's not going to hurt us.
To put the industry's success into perspective, since the ban of U.S. products, the LCBO says sales of Canadian products are up by about 18%, and sales of Ontario's top quality wines are up by about 44%. All of this adding to the list of reasons of why producers say tariffs, at least on wine, are nothing to worry about. Travis.
Thank you, Robert. That's CTV's Robert Lothian reporting for us tonight. And on that note, it doesn't sound like Ontario will be putting American booze back on LCBO shelves anytime soon. And after months of Buy Canadian, would shoppers even want it back? CTV's Sanjay Maru sought the answer.
For more than a year, American-made beer, wine, and spirits have been missing from Ontario shelves. And following the announcement of a new 50% tariff on certain Canadian goods, Premier Doug Ford says that is not about to change.
I'm tired of the bully trying to take our lunch money all the time. We always seem to be on our back heels. We need to be on the offense.
The Trump administration is citing Canada's restrictions on American alcohol as one justification for the new tariff set to take effect in about 4 weeks. But even if the two countries eventually reach a deal, there is another question. If American alcohol returns to Ontario shelves, would Canadians still buy it?
Why should we? After everything that's going on now, you should just take care of yourself.
I don't know. I guess I would be hesitant. It seems like there's such retaliation going back and forth. There's a lot of tempers flaring and such.
Recent polling, 2 polls were just conducted.
Bro, if people really don't want to get American alcohol, they would just not buy it. Taking enough, of everywhere, I think it's just so stupid, man. Just let the people do their own choice. You let them vote. So, let them choose their alcohol. If they want to buy one type, let them be. I don't understand.
that show that the supermajority of Canadians still feel that an elbows-up approach
Ooh,
to
Five Divine.
dealing with Americans is what they feel comfortable with.
Howard Ramos from Western University says the Buy Canadian movement has shown unusual staying power, with consumers generally following through on what they say about avoiding American products. He adds there has been some slippage over time, but the latest tariff threat will likely push more Canadians to dig in their heels and make that boycott even more entrenched.
As Trump gaslights Canadians and people from the rest of the world, sympathy towards the Trump regime, if not American, seems to harden.
The Premier says he would be happy to see the two sides reach a deal soon, but warns this latest round of tariffs would hit Ontario the hardest. As for the Prime Minister, Mark Carney says he and President Trump have agreed to intensify negotiations in the coming weeks.
Canadians, governments, business, labor will stand together to build Canada strong and to have a trading relationship with our North American partners that benefits everyone.
Sanjay Maru, CTV News.
The map is Canada Juice, not gonna lie. Whoa, no.
To make it easier to buy Canadian booze, the province has joined 8 others in an agreement that opens the door to more direct sale of wine, beer, and spirits across provincial lines. Officials say it's another step toward breaking down interprovincial trade barriers. Prime Minister Mark Carney says he and President Trump have agreed to intensify talks over the next month. The new tariffs are set to take effect August 19th, hitting more than 500 Canadian products, from cement to furniture to toys to sporting goods, with dairy among the biggest flashpoints. Dairy has long been in President Trump's crosshairs, and now it's back in the spotlight, with dairy farms across Essex County keeping a close eye on the negotiations. CTV's Geneviève Boschman explains what's at stake.
Like 6 generations of his family before him, Angus McKinnon has produced milk just a stone's throw from the U.S. border. And he's been wondering when the American neighbors would target the industry.
We've been waiting for Donald Trump to come down on dairy for the last 2 years.
Yeah, because we already had it.
Tariffs will have little impact on producers themselves, though distributors
We already
might
had
take
it
a
on
hit.
Trump, so
But
why
some
would you
producers
don't
have
put
feared
it on
Canada's
us?
supply management system could be sacrificed to appease the U.S. Some critics in this country have said dairy should not be a sacred cow. The U.S. pointed to Canada's supply management system as a main irritant, justifying 50% tariffs, and put Canadian milk, lactose, and whey on the tariff hit list.
He's
Supply
milking
management
us.
sets quotas for Canadian dairy producers, fixes prices, but also limits dairy imports from the U.S. and other countries, imposing quotas and high tariffs.
Brings a great economic stability. We have a guaranteed price for our milk.
In a statement, the Dairy Farmers of Canada said dairy trade is covered by CUSMA, and the U.S. has been successful in accessing the Canadian market under this agreement. The association said that between 2019 and 2025, exports of U.S. products to Canada rose from $423 million to $1.06 billion. And dairy farmers say they're holding Ottawa to its word that supply management is here to stay. Canada is home to over 9,000 dairy farms, nearly half of which are in Quebec.
Quebec was built on agriculture.
Most are family-run with small
Yeah.
herds. The state of Wisconsin alone produces more milk than Canada as a whole. But U.S. President Donald Trump has long said supply management is a highly protectionist barrier, treating American farmers unfairly.
You can see that he's positioning himself. Because keep in mind, Middle America elected Donald Trump. Middle America is agriculture.
Milk producers will be watching closely over the next 30 days just what happens with the tariffs. Geneviève Beauchemin, CTV News, Coaticook, Quebec.
While Ottawa tries to navigate a trade dispute here at home, another labor dispute may just be weeks away. QP Local 2974 has filed a no-board report, putting Essex-Windsor paramedics in a legal strike position as early as August 8th. An essential services agreement has also been approved, allowing for a 20% reduction in ambulance service if there is job action. The union says pay and staffing remain the biggest sticking points, but is prepared to return to the bargaining table at any time. In response, the County of Essex saying in a statement that it looks forward to more discussions with the union, assuring that for now, Essex-Windsor EMS continues to operate normally. Staying with healthcare, 2 local hospitals are joining forces in a move they say will save millions of dollars while improving patient care. But as CTV's Chris Campbell reports, officials are stressing this is not a merger.
This is not a merger, it's a strategic partnership.
Officials insist this is not a merger. Instead, both hospitals will remain independent with their own boards of directors. The plan is to share administrative leadership where duplication can be eliminated. Beginning in September, Windsor Regional President and CEO Kristen Kennedy will oversee both hospitals, while Erie Shore's interim president and CEO Caitlin Dryden will become the joint chief financial officer. The hospitals estimate the new model will save about $2 million annually.
This comes down to two issues, and one is how do we find efficiencies in the system, and how do we enhance the experience for our patients and our families in the community from a quality perspective. We believe that we have found over $2 million in efficiency.
Hospital leaders say those savings won't come through layoffs. Instead, they'll rely on vacancies, attrition, and sharing administrative expertise between the two organizations. They also hope closer collaboration will help improve patient flow and reduce wait times across the region.
To find $2 million of savings with no layoffs and just working on bringing some teams together is a great win for the community and for the healthcare sector.
Officials at Erie Shore say the agreement actually strengthens the Leamington Hospital by giving it access to expertise that can be difficult for a smaller organization to recruit on its own.
The hospital isn't going away. In fact, what we're doing is we're strengthening some of the skill sets that we wouldn't have being a smaller hospital. So, you know, the hospital isn't going away. The board of directors is still going to be there.
The hospital boards say the partnership won't change the care patients receive or the governance of either hospital. Instead, they say it allows both organizations to spend less on administration and more on frontline care.
You'll see that reinvested in patient care. Our intent is to try and find efficiencies, and by sharing positions, we find efficiencies right up front.
Chris Campbell, CTV News.
A tragic update tonight from the Detroit River. A 55-year-old Michigan man is dead after a sailboat capsized near Amherstburg. Police say both men were pulled from the water, but one slipped under before rescuers arrived. He later died in hospital. Neither were wearing life jackets. Meanwhile, a rollover crash slowed traffic down along Tecumseh Road East this afternoon. Emergency crews responded to a collision near Lozon Parkway involving a compact car and a Jeep Cherokee. The impact left the Jeep on its side, causing major traffic delays in the area. There's no word on injuries, and police are continuing to investigate. A major Hells Angels gathering, but no major problems. Police say more than 750 members and associates visited Windsor, Essex through the weekend, while officers issued about 40 tickets and other enforcement actions. They say there were no significant public safety concerns. And from bikes to buses, the city's new West End Transit Terminal is already making a difference, both for transit users and mental health services. CTV's Bob Belichico reports.
The new Transit Windsor Terminal at Hotel Dieu Grace Healthcare is doing more than moving buses off the street.
For us, it expands our ability to service more people here.
This building behind me was created for the bus drivers, and it's a great amenity for them. But even though the hospital does not have any access to this building, it's a great benefit to Hotel Dieu Grace Healthcare. CEO Bill Morris says that building will free up the current Transit Windsor space inside the healthcare facility and open the door to a major investment.
We're now going to invest $300,000, renovate the space, and create a space for a mental health and addictions program. It's called the ACT program, the Assertive Community Treatment Program.
Hotel Dieu Grace Healthcare offers support to about 200 people.
This investment really validates the fact that there's a need and a greater demand.
Mara says work will begin in early August and the updated space will be open by October. He is excited to move the program from its current space at the back of the property to a place just steps away from the transit terminal.
It'll also have better amenities because we're going to introduce shower facilities, laundry facilities, kitchen facilities. It's really a health and wellness program for individuals that have been struggling with mental health and addictions.
On the other side of the city, the hope is to have the East End terminal open around Labor Day. That opening will bring a different impact.
There will be an increase in new routes that will be connecting the East End to this terminal, and also what's really important is travel times.
Ward 7 City Councilor Angelo Marignani points out buses won't need to navigate through a mall parking lot anymore and will have easy access to and from the terminal. However, Marignani is highlighting a concern: the lack of public restrooms at either facility.
He says the city is looking into building a high-end restroom at both locations equipped with modern amenities.
We will ensure that these washrooms are secure to prevent vandalism, and that's one of the primary concerns that we're having with a lot of our washrooms throughout the city.
Bob Belichico, CTV News.
CTV meteorologist Gary Archibald has your full weather details coming up in 2 minutes' time.
If you don't leave the gym, I'm going to have to call the police on you.
And still ahead, faith, fitness, and a fiery debate. A religious symbol sparks big questions. CTV meteorologist Gary Archibald joins us with a look at the weather. And Gary, it's getting a little cooler tomorrow.
You're right about that. I think most of us would welcome this change in terms of the temperature trend. Good evening once again, folks. Today was above seasonal. I think what was noticeable, air quality improved. It was still in the low mid tier. Not great, but not horrible. Temperature about 3 degrees above seasonal. Windsor, Essex, Chatham-Kent slightly cooler, closer to 29 degrees Celsius. And the low was a warm near 23 this morning, pre-dawn. The good news is this system of low pressure, you can make it out, that counterclockwise swirl around a core that's right over the heart of North Bay, for example, pushing showers right through the heart of the lower Great Lakes. Further east, thunderstorms, violent winds stateside through Kentucky and Tennessee. Meanwhile, we did see some thunderstorm activity over northern central parts of the Lake Erie shores, so just to the southeast and certainly east of Chatham-Kent. The good news is there will be a clearing. This cold front that brought the showers and thunderstorms through the upper Ohio Valley and lower Great Lakes introduces a cooler air mass. The good news is it will be comfortably cool over the next couple of days, below seasonal, in fact, in terms of daytime highs and lows. What rain remains? Well, the projections aren't that impressive, and the computer models aren't really in a lot of agreement, shall we say. Less than 5 millimeters between now and tomorrow afternoon. I think tomorrow is mostly a breezy day at times, especially in the midday, through the midday rather, and early in the morning. Look at this overnight temperature. We've been accustomed to accustomed to temperatures being in the low 20s, feeling like the upper 20s, 15 degrees, cool and breezy. Tomorrow's breakdown has lots of sunshine.
Dude is weird, I
some
feel like.
fair weather cloud for the morning through the midday. The afternoon, up to 25, our average is 28. 25 feels like about 27 at peak, which means humidity levels are down. And when the humidity levels are down, it's much more comfortable and civilized. 25, 25, and 27, sunny, fair, high UV. Protect yourself with sunblock and, of course, sunglasses. But it looks good for the midweek through to Friday at the very least. Warming up for the weekend, cloudier and showers possible. Monday, Tuesday, back to more seasonal values, both in terms of the highs and lows anticipated. Travis, that is a look at how the weather is working.
Thank you, Gary. The next round of contract talks in Canada's auto sector now has a start date. Unifor says it will begin bargaining with General Motors on August 10th in Toronto. The talks follow a new 3-year deal with Ford, which includes 3% annual wage increases. More than 4,600 Unifor members at GM facilities across Ontario, including Cami and Ingersoll, are covered by the negotiations. With the next round of U.S. tariffs looming, Canada's premiers are gathering to talk strategy, and as CTV's Maria Saru reports, they're not all seeing eye to eye.
We've got a very busy schedule over the next 48 hours, 72 hours, and this is going to make it a little busier.
Donald Trump's tariffs meant some rearranging for PEI's Premier Rob Lance hosting and chairing this week's Council of the Federation meetings. And as his counterparts arrived, some were losing patience with the U.S. president.
We need to stand up to the bully, and we need to hit him tariff to tariff.
There is not a chance in hell that U.S. alcohol is going back on the shelf in British Columbia. And the idea of the president that he can bully us into whatever he wishes
is incorrect.
Several premiers said Ottawa has not asked them to reverse course on American alcohol bans.
No, the federal government hasn't asked me to lift it, and I will be supportive of the decisions made by all the premiers and the Prime Minister.
But Alberta and Saskatchewan already have. Both lifted their suspensions last year.
I want a trade agreement with the United States of America. They're our largest trading partner, have been for all of our life, yours and I's, and likely will be into the future. At the end of the day, why would you want to fight with your largest trading partner?
It's ultimately a province-by-province decision, but some are calling for a united response and a clear direction from the Prime Minister before new tariffs take effect in about a month.
Quebec's economy is really impacted by the tariffs, and we'll need to adopt a strategy.
We need a plan moving forward.
The premiers continue their talks tomorrow before Mark Carney joins them in person on Thursday. Maria Saru, CTV News, Charlottetown.
On the markets today, the TSX gained 409 points, the Dow added 385, and the Nasdaq is up 329. The Canadian dollar fell a fifth of a cent today. Gold gained more than $60 an ounce, and oil rose $1.86 a barrel. CTV News Windsor has launched a newsletter helping you start your day with the latest local news. By signing up, you'll get direct local content straight from CTV Windsor to your inbox, including top stories, the forecast, and videos. You can sign up at ctvnewswindsor.ca. A religious symbol or a safety concern. One man says he was asked to leave a Windsor gym for wearing a ceremonial Sikh dagger, an incident that's now sparked a broader debate about religious freedoms and public safety. CTV's Stephanie Mazzotti reports.
You're kicking me out of the gym right now because you are scared that I'm going to take my religious symbol. So you're scared that I'm going to take this religious symbol and kill somebody.
Gurpratap Singh Sangha says he took this video after an employee at Good Life Fitness asked him to leave for wearing his kirpan, a ceremonial dagger that baptized Sikhs wear as a mandatory article of faith.
What I'm saying is you have a weapon on your person. A member has brought it to my attention, and for the safety of me and everybody else in the gym, I'm asking you to leave.
If you don't leave the gym, I'm going to have to call the police on you. So I said, if you want to call the police, go ahead, right? So that's what she did.
A 2006 Supreme Court of Canada ruling recognizes the kirpan as a protected religious article. The court found it can be accommodated, provided it remains sheathed and does not exceed 23 centimeters in overall length. Public safety analyst Chris Lewis says he doesn't see the need to wear it in a gym while working out.
Ultimately, the gym should have the authority to say, take it off, go put it in your car, or put it in a locker, and you can work out. But you're not wearing a dagger on your chest in the gym in front of patrons that are concerned about it.
I'm not sure if that's a safe environment. Not that the person was going to do anything, and I guess I'm assuming that, but I just felt like maybe that's not really the safe place to bring something like that.
I would have been a bit alarmed.
It's a sword. I mean, I would feel kind of threatened.
I would have let him stay in because he's just trying to work out.
A lot of these things are based out of ignorance. It's not that a Sikh wearing a kirpan just wears it to the gym. They're wearing it at all times, whether it's sleeping, at home, bathing even. It's worn literally at all times. It's treated as a part of your body.
The World Sikh Organization of Canada says the request to leave is unacceptable.
When you go to a gym, you are seeing all kinds of items that potentially could be used to do serious harm, whether it's dumbbells or barbells or weight plates. But you don't look at those items and say, oh my God, is someone going to hit me with them? You do what you're there to do, which is exercise.
In a statement sent to CTV News, Good Life Fitness states, the interaction shown in the video reflects a situation where our established practices were not applied as intended. We comply with all applicable government legislation, including Canadian human rights laws.
Good Life did apologize to me. They sent me an email, so Good Life did say that they were in the wrong, and it's not what they are, what they believe in and what they represent. I just feel like maybe Good Life should publicly apologize for this as well.
As for Sangha, he hopes this incident is an opportunity to educate the public.
Educate the public. People make mistakes. right? Everyone, you're a human, you're going to make a mistake. But good life should also be educating their workers on different faiths, right? And what they believe in, that to accept all, right? So that's what I strongly advise.
Stephanie Mazzotti, CTV News.
Nah, nobody have the right to have a big knife, dude. Why is it so loud at the end, bro? What the...
Let's take one last look at the 7-day.
I cannot bring a knife like this. They cannot. There's a... Bro, equality is not there. Like, if some men can bring knife and some men cannot, like, where's the equality then? What?
With CTV meteorologist Gary Archibald. And Gary, what can you tell us about the week ahead?
You know what? I think we are headed towards cool air, really holding on to us for the next little while. In terms of the atmospheric conditions, a calming presence, a bit breezy tomorrow morning, but the overnight temperature of 15 feels more late summer, early fall-like. That's what we're dealing with. A high of 25 is 3 degrees below seasonal in the next couple of days, and we'll see increasing sunshine from Wednesday through to Thursday and Friday. A high of 29, followed by 31, so the weekend, as you can see, is cloudier with a chance of showers and warming up, and then cooling off a bit again. Monday and Tuesday of next week, both those temperatures seasonal and not so bad. A few scattered showers are possible. Wherever you are, have a good night's rest, of course, and enjoy the cooler, better weather tomorrow. Travis?
Thank you, Gary. Finally tonight, a happy ending after a missing puppy survived weeks on its own before turning up in the middle of San Francisco Bay. Rescuers sprang into action after the dog was spotted swimming near a waterfront park. They were able to safely bring the puppy to shore, and since then it's been reunited with its family. The dog had been missing since July 4th. That's our time for tonight. I hope you'll join us tomorrow. For now, I'm Travis Fortnum. Take care.
The fuck is that music, bro? Oh, okay, bro. Okay, dude. Okay.
If you became Prime Minister tomorrow, what would you do in your first 90 days?
I would pass a lot of legislation.
Twisted them up because of that music that fucking take off all my attention. This was
You
so
asked him
bad.
multiple times in the House of Commons if we were in a technical recession or a real recession.
Image does not stand up to scrutiny. The illusion of Mark Carney is far superior to the reality of Mark Carney.
Do you believe there should be public disclosure or a formal investigation into whether anything was offered, positions, promises, incentives, or future opportunities in exchange for the individuals who flew across?
They ultimately betrayed the people that voted for them, and I think they will be held accountable.
What is your take on what just took place in these online censorship bills?
They want to control your thoughts, your religious beliefs. They want to be able to have the capacity to surveil people's online activities.
Courts are now wrestling with whether Aboriginal title can coexist with privately held fee simple land. What is your position?
That fee simple must take priority. Once it is granted, then it must be final.
If you became Prime Minister, how long do you think it would take for young Canadians before they could realistically start entering the housing market again?
I think within a term in office, it's reasonable and realistic to expect that home ownership would normalize again for young people.
Politics can ask a lot from a family. What has this journey been like for your wife and children? And if they were sitting here today and I asked them what it's cost them, what do you think they'd say?
It's cost them a lot.
Canada feels more deeply divided now, regionally, politically, economically, and culturally. How on earth would you go about bringing this country back together? Pierre Poilievre, this is an absolute privilege to sit down with you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Chief.
I want to start by just asking, if you became Prime Minister tomorrow, what would you do in your first 90 days?
Well, I would pass a lot of legislation almost on an emergency basis to turn the country around. Let's start with the economy. I would immediately pass an economic rescue plan that would include eliminating all the anti-development laws like C-69, the anti-development law, which blocks pipelines and gums up mines. I'd get rid of the ban on shipping oil off the northwest coast of BC by repealing C-69. I'd repeal the industrial carbon tax. And I would also institute some major reductions in the cost of the bureaucracy, the consultants, the foreign aid, the corporate welfare programs, the handouts to fake and phony refugees. You'd have to act on all of those things immediately in order to start turning the ship around. And then I would introduce also an emergency anti-crime law to reverse all the all the sort of soft on crime liberal laws that have come forward in the last decade, and bring in tough criminal justice policies into the statutes that will lock up the criminals. I think you could do all of those things in the first 90 days, and if I were Prime Minister, I would.
Fascinating. You're an individual I find that people have different perspectives on, vastly different perspectives. Your supporters see you as bringing much needed change. I think that one of the challenges we have in a democracy is the Conservatives haven't had a voice federally for a very long time now, and so people who are Conservative feel very frustrated about where we are. And then you have people on the left who see you as a very divisive individual. Where do you think those misunderstandings and misrepresentations come from?
Well, they're very deliberate. It's obviously the liberal media and the liberal establishment, which has enormous funds and share of voice, are threatened by a change. They have made a fortune. They have gained power and wealth over the last 10 years, making other people poor. I mean, it's been a great time to be a liberal lobbyist, a liberal consultant, a liberal corporate welfare bum. If you're well connected to the government, you've probably made millions and millions of dollars over the last 10 years, effectively ripping off the taxpayer and the Canadian working class. And they see me coming along, threatening that to end the party for them and put the people back in charge of the government. And so they're going to use every megaphone they have to disparage and defame me. And so it's been a very deliberate, consistent campaign by the Liberal Club of lobbyists, corporate power brokers, and insiders that want to stop me from putting the people back in charge of the government. And so that's where the misunderstanding comes from, to answer your question directly.
That also ties in with the last election, where one of the pieces of commentary was around the fact that there were so many government employees within your district. How do you reflect on that loss and what that means as you continue to talk about some of these issues that aren't supported by many people in Ottawa who are employed by
Well, I don't regret telling the truth. I mean, the reality is we have far too much bureaucracy in this country. Under the Liberal government, the bureaucracy ballooned by 50% in bodies and about 60% in cost. It grew about 4 times faster than the population and roughly 4 times faster than the economy. And I believe we needed to cut back on the bureaucracy because there's no free lunch. You can't balloon the bureaucracy unless you're prepared to raise taxes on the working people who fund it, and I'm not. I want to put money back in the pockets of people who actually do productive things and work hard. I want young people to be able to keep more of their paycheck to own a home. I want moms and dads to be able to afford food. I want seniors to be able to retire with dignity, but they can't do that when they're carrying around this morbidly obese bureaucracy on their backs. I made, perhaps it was the political mistake of telling that truth during an election campaign while serving as an MP in an Ottawa riding. But, I mean, the alternative is just to be a liar and claim that we can, balloon the bureaucracy without charging you more. And that's, I don't feel comfortable lying to the Canadian people. So I told the truth, I paid the price, but I bounced back, and I don't regret it.
I'm excited to ask you this question. We asked ChatGPT to compare your December 2025 interview with Donna Friesen to her interview with Mark Carney. It found that Carney was asked serious policy questions, but he was mostly questioned as a prime minister managing very, very difficult files. Your interview focused much more on whether you had failed, whether your leadership was a problem, whether Canadians had rejected you, and whether your caucus was falling apart. When you hear that, what are your takeaways?
Well, first of all, I think Donna Friesen should ask if the viewers have rejected her. When you look at the state of chorus media. The reality is that there's a big illusion about Mark Carney. He has failed at everything he's done, but managed to fail upwards afterwards. Like as the governor of the Bank of England, he caused the worst inflation in the G7 and a housing crisis in London. Then he went on to be a corporate power broker where his job was to harvest a bunch of government handouts for corporate insiders and then put the money in offshore tax havens. And then he was Trudeau's economic advisor, wherein he helped double housing costs, food bank lineups, and the national debt. All his advice was followed, and we know that because his advice is public in his book. And then he became prime minister, and what has he done in that role? He's given us the only recession in the G7, the fastest food price inflation, the worst household debt, and yet the media doesn't ask him questions about his actual results. They just lob softballs at him so that he can regurgitate the same promises he's been breaking his entire career. And frankly, he's been wrong about every single major economic issue of the last decade. On the other hand, I wish the media would ask more about the issues that affect people's lives, because I'm the only one who's been talking about how we can unblock home building so young people can afford homes, or get the taxes and the red tape off food production so folks can afford groceries, how we can bring back sound money and let people afford their lives again. And those are the kinds of questions that, I was just watching on YouTube the other day. There was a guy who went on and said he watched my interview of his Diary of the CEO. And he said he, in that one interview, had gone from being a Pierre Poilievre hater to being a strong, ardent supporter in one interview. And the explanation was that he had never heard my message. He had heard things said about me by the liberal media and the liberal establishment and believed them all. And then when he actually heard me talk for half an hour unfiltered, he said, wow, that's what he believes? That's his plan? That's what I support. That's what I've always wanted. And so one of my biggest political challenges is to get through this incredible filter of liberal interest groups that basically see their role in...
Yeah, I think they managed to portray Pierre Poilievre as a meanie during a moment because he really roasted Trudeau, but at the end, Trudeau needed to be roasted, and I think if you do the same thing to Mark Carney, that could be a nice thing.
As propagandizing for the Liberal Party and against me, and I'm determined to keep doing that.
Well, I appreciate you being willing to do this interview today, because I think that's how a lot of independent journalists, independent media figures feel, is we're up against those same establishments where
Trudeau?
Politicians are just used to going on to CTV, Global News, CBC to get their message out. And so people on the outside who don't have the same questions, who aren't going to follow the same line, have a tougher time trying to get in, because people are just so used to the inertia of going through those processes. So I just want to quickly thank you, but also thank your team for organizing all of this, because it's a huge privilege to ask you questions I don't feel like you get asked enough.
Right. Well, listen, I think we need to do more of this. We need to democratize political discussion in this country. Far too often, those who have a vested interest, a conflict of interest, are told are given the microphone and told that they can espouse their agenda. They have too much sway. Those are the people who, you look at the major political talk shows. Who do they bring on as commentators? Lobbyists.
I know what's sway because of the shooter game. The sway is called when you're gonna move like this. It's the reason why I know what's sway. And I can understand what he's saying. I'm so French.
Lobbyists have an interest in being liked by the government because they make money off lobbying the government. So you think they're going to say anything that is hostile to the people in power? Of course not. And so, they're not going to criticize a minister on Monday and then go lobby him on Tuesday. But so often it's the the club that dominates the discourse in this country. And that's why so many other people, the people who do the work in Canada, feel left behind.
I couldn't agree more. I want to ask a personal question.
Yes.
Politics can ask a lot from a family. What has this journey been like for your wife and children? And if they were sitting here today and I asked them what it's cost them, what do you think they'd say?
I think it's cost them a lot. I mean, yesterday I went to just for, for people who might watch this later on Sunday is Father's Day. It's Friday now, so it's 2 days from now. But I won't be home for Father's Day. So my wife showed up at the airport with my kids. She took them straight from daycare and school to the airport to send me off with a nice Father's Day card in advance, in expectation that I won't see them on that very special day. So I'm away a lot. It's very hard on the kids. They're young, and they work. I work very hard, but that's not a problem. The sacrifice of being away from the kids is the hardest part. And my wife is a real champion. She steps up to replace a lot of the contributions that I would normally be making. And we're very blessed to have extended family. My wife is Latina. When you marry a Latina, you marry the whole family. And that brings a lot of relief because they do a lot of the legwork, picking up the kids, taking them to different things. Some weekends when both Ann and I are away, they step in and entertain the kids for the whole weekend. And they're just wonderful. But it is, life is short, and time is the most precious commodity. Unlike money, you can't get lost time back. It's gone. When it's gone, it's gone. And that's particularly true for small children. They're only like that for so long. It's a very special time for, when they're under 10, there's just a certain special magic about kids. And every minute you're not enjoying that is a minute you'll never get back. And so I'm conscious of that. And at the same time, though, the way I justify it is I believe that when my kids get older, they'll realize that we as a family were sacrificing for something that was worth it. And that's a lesson I want them to know, that you have to sacrifice in life for your own future benefit, but also for the benefit of other people.
The country.
So I like to think that there's a positive lesson that they will grow from and hopefully replicate in their own lives.
Do you ever fear that it won't be worth it? That in the end, when you're 90, missing those moments won't have been worth it?
I think anybody who's away from their kids a lot has to fear that. And it's also a reminder not to waste time. You just can't be frittering away hours, thumbing through social media or daydreaming or doing stupid things that don't advance either your family or your work mission. Because every minute you're doing that is a minute you're not spending with the kids. So I've had to become a lot more disciplined in terms of my time. Like when I'm sitting on an airplane, I'm tired, I have to be working because I know that if I don't do the work then, that will come out of my time when I'm back at home, time that I could be spending with the kids. But, we've managed to strike a pretty good balance. Like almost every night that I'm in town, I read to my little boy, I play with my little girl, have her up on my shoulders. We take the kids out every weekend when I'm in town to parks and playgrounds, and we play basketball with them, and we just stay very, very involved. I try to do a FaceTime with them. The goal is to do it at least once a day, sometimes more, so that they see their dad even when he's not at home with them. And we work at it and we fight for it. But, there are a lot of other people that make a lot of sacrifices too. You think of truckers. They're away from their families a long time as well on icy roads in faraway provinces, or there are soldiers who serve long-term missions overseas and risk their lives doing it. So when I compare myself to the sacrifices of others, I know that I don't have it that bad.
Independent political commentators are now reaching major audiences. One voice I never hear about on CBC, Global, CTV is David from Loose on the Loose. I'm wondering if you're aware of his work. He has over 200,000 subscribers. He gets around 80,000 views per episode. I don't agree with him on a lot, but I think having a diverse media diet where you're hearing from people on the left and people on the right, understanding how people see things is important. What do you think of where people are starting to get the political information from, and Dave?
Well, I encourage people to listen to what he has to say. I think he's connected the dots on a lot of liberal corruption. The media in Ottawa has done absolutely almost nothing in reporting on the enormous corruption that is present in the Liberal government, whether it's this $200 million space pad where they overpaid, the government overpaid with your money for what was effectively a slab of concrete and enriching a bunch of Liberal insiders, or the Brookfield conflicts that are so obvious, the fact that the Prime Minister is still invested in the biggest tax dodger in Canada, according to what the Toronto Star called it before he got into politics. And when he got into politics, the Toronto Star stopped reporting on it altogether. Then you've got all the consulting contracts that go out, the prescribed IT scandal of millions of dollars paid for almost no value to tax dollars. These are things that Moose on the Loose and others are exposing, and I think we need to have those independent voices that get around the censorship in Ottawa so Canadians know how badly they're being ripped off.
Speaking of which, the government just pushed through a lot of new bills, including laws on hate speech, online safety, and police access to digital information. Even the CBC came out with a panel that were all blown away by how this is unprecedented and inappropriate. What is your take? You were just there. What is your take on what just took place in these online censorship bills?
Well, we're seeing the more consolidation of power and control in the hands of the Carney Liberal government. They want to control your thoughts, your religious beliefs, they want to be able to have the capacity to surveil people's online activities with laws that go far beyond what exists in any other democratic country. And what you're seeing is a large-scale surveillance and censorship apparatus that the Liberals have put together with C9, which bans certain Bible verses that the government considers to be politically incorrect, with the old C11, which is the Online Streaming Act, which allows the government to manipulate algorithms to promote content it wants you to see and demote other content it does not want you to see. With C22, which basically turns giant tech companies into surveillance.
It reminds me of a Reddit mod that just tried to disable his.
Numerous other.
I think we don't think the same.
That they brought forward that for C18, for example, C18 makes it so that a lot of independent media outlets can't even get on Instagram and Facebook anymore. And we're the only place in the world where that's the case. We're the only democracy in the world where that's the case. So we're fighting for free speech. I'm a free speech champion. I believe that people should be able to decide what they think. They should be allowed to think thoughts that I don't agree with, that the government finds outrageous, and that is the only way free speech. It is the only way speech actually matters if you're allowed to say things that the government does not want you to say. Otherwise, there's no such thing as free speech. So we need to throw open the curtains and let the sunshine in.
I couldn't agree more. I am as close to a free speech absolutist as you can get. I've come out against the denialist bill that was put forward. I've interviewed individuals like Frances Widdowson about her thoughts on what happened with the Kamloops 215 story. I don't necessarily agree with her, but we need to be able to have disagreements, debates, and that's what makes our country stronger. And then people who come out about the Indigenous kind of reconciliation industry, they're not wrong to say that there are a huge group of lobbyists, lawyers, and voices that want to make money off of the...
Many of them are not even Indigenous. There's people who are bureaucrats, lawyers, lobbyists who have nothing to do with the Indigenous communities. They're just showing up to make money off of both Indigenous people and Canadian and other Canadian taxpayers, which is not what Canadians think of when they imagine that we're doing reconciliation.
And I just want to briefly say, like, I think in this interview, there may be people sitting here waiting for me to ask you really aggressive, tough questions. I think people are already doing plenty of that. I think that there's already a lane for people trying to gotcha you, attack you, and I don't think that's productive to the types of conversations we need to be having as Canadians. I also strongly believe, and I was talking to your team before this, your role, and people forget this, and I understand, but your role is to offer different policy solutions, different options for the government to be considering. You're supposed to be a government in waiting, demonstrating a different path forward, and so criticizing you when you don't have the power to enact law, create bills, and form decisions that will impact the country seems not a good use of my time or your time to be trying to find a question that's going to catch you. But I do want to ask, Canada feels more deeply divided now, regionally, politically, economically, and culturally. How on earth would you go about bringing this country back together?
I believe that the reason that we're divided is because the government is trying to control too much. Control too much of the economy, too much of our speech, too much of our thoughts. And when that happens, so control is a zero-sum game. If one person has more control, someone else has to have less because there's only a finite amount, 100%. So obviously people have to fight over control, and that's divisive. Freedom is not finite, and therefore people, if one person gets more freedom, that doesn't mean someone else gets less. They both get more. It's the irony, right? So like if your neighbor gets freedom of speech, you don't lose freedom of speech, you gain it as well at the same time. You know, if you have a Jewish neighbor who gets freedom of religion, it doesn't mean you as a, I don't know, Christian, I don't know your religion, me as a Christian loses freedom of speech. I get the freedom as well. So one person's freedom is another person's freedom. That's why people don't fight over freedom, they fight for freedom. And no, that's very theoretical, so let me get down to specifics. If the government concentrates all the money in Ottawa, then everybody has to go to Ottawa and fight for a bigger share. If the government instead disperses economic decisions through a free enterprise system, then you no longer have to fight for a bigger share of the pie. You go out and create more because no one's holding you back. You start a business, your business does great. That doesn't stop the other business in the other side of the country from starting up and doing even better. You're both creating a value for your customers and your workers with which they voluntarily choose to participate as buyers and as employees. And therefore, everyone is getting better off through a free market system. So I think if the government were to get out of people's hair, leave people alone, you know, mind its own damn business. If I were starting a political party, it'd be the mind your own damn business party. Then people would be able to get along a lot better. You know, it's like if you're in a household and everybody's always in each other's business and everyone's hair. Then you'll be fighting like cats and dogs. Whereas if you live in a household where people sort of, you know, clean up their own room, take care of their own affairs, and live their own lives and work together voluntarily, then everyone in the household lives in harmony. That's the kind of country we need to have. Unite
this map is
through
juiced.
freedom rather than dividing through control.
One of the things I did that was a bit unique to this interview is I reached out to some of my peers to find out what their questions were for you, because I knew that I was going to have my own lens and other people are going to have theirs. This comes from a law professor that I'm a huge fan of. President Trump's political and economic attacks on Canada have changed the political landscape here. How do you campaign for conservative principles when many Canadians are looking unfavorably at conservatism in the U.S.?
Well, first of all, I would say we need to focus on what we can actually control here in Canada. There's nobody who can control President Trump. Mark Carney promised he would, and since the election, we've seen he's been unable to do that. In fact, he's basically caved on everything when it comes to the president. He's caved on the digital services tax, the Netflix tax. He's caved on counter tariffs, on military spending, countless of many of these things that we should have been doing anyway. Carney's been forced to do them because he ultimately backed down and went from elbows up to sucking up. So the moral of that story is let's focus on what we can control. We can't control Trump, but we can control what we do with our own economy. And I think the positive thing is that there's a lot we can do. We should be the richest country in the world right now. By far. We have the fourth most farmland per capita. Depending on how you measure it, we have about the fifth or sixth most natural gas, the fourth most oil, the third most uranium, the most potash, the biggest oceanic coastline. Like, we should be by far the richest country anywhere on Earth. And we can do that if we unlock our enterprises through fast permits, low taxes, and more competition. We unblock our resources by rapidly approving pipelines, mines, ports, and other things. If we unbridle our workers with low taxes so that hard work is actually pays off and people benefit from their contribution. I think that's how we bring back the $1 trillion that has left for the United States. And you know, if your goal is to get back at President Trump, well, the way to do it is by unlocking and unblocking our own economy so that we can compete with our American friends and compete with the rest of the world, rather than just, you know, political theater.
To clarify, I think the argument being made here is because Trump represents conservatism in the U.S., it's no secret that the liberals have tried to paint you as a Donald Trump-like figure. I don't think that's the case, but they've tried to connect the conservatism in the U.S. with the conservatism in Canada. And someone like David from Moose on the Loose is a fan of Donald Trump's conservatism style. And then you have red Tories in Ontario that aren't a fan of his style, but are still somewhat conservatives. But it seems like there's this gap here of how do you sell Canadians who are afraid of conservatism in the U.S., making its manifest here in Canada without doing that?
The answer is to put forward a uniquely Canadian agenda, and that's what I believe I've done. I mean, you know, you look at it, here you got, here's a real choice. Mark Carney moved his corporate headquarters to the United States of America days after he learned of the tariffs. He and the Liberal Party have implemented policies that have driven $1 trillion to the U.S. Of our investment. So I don't understand how that is standing up for Canada. If you want a truly patriotic agenda, it should be one that unbridles and unlocks our own economy and does well by the Canadian people. Like that we should judge the policies by what they do, not by how they make us feel about Donald Trump. You know, if I can implement a policy that makes it possible for 25-year-olds to buy houses in Vancouver, or for you to feel safe walking down East Hastings Street, or to make the Persian community in Vancouver feel safe again from the risk of the IRGC terrorists, or let mothers buy affordable food. Who cares what Donald Trump thinks about any of those things? Shouldn't we be concerned about our own people rather than whether our policies make us feel superior to or in conflict with the U.S. president?
Why do you think you run such high disapproval numbers with women? What do you think's underneath?
I don't know that I do. There's now 2 major post-election studies out on how people voted, and this was the highest, best performance by the Conservative Party since at least the 1980s in support from women, and there was almost no gender gap in the last election. Support for the Conservatives under me was roughly as high among women as it was among men. So that is something that just sort of political commentators have repeated ad nauseum, but there's no support for it in the actual data.
I will provide you some data then. I have from Abacus data, 39% of men say Poilievre understands people like them. Among women, this is 8 points lower, and 38% of men say Poilievre shares my values. This drops to 29% among women per Abacus data.
Well, I mean, look at the Abacus post-election poll, because it showed that I think we got 39% of the female vote in the last election, and 43% of the male vote. So that's like almost no gender gap, and would be a massive increase in support for Conservatives among women over the prior election and over any other election since the Conservative Party was really newly reconstituted. So I just, you know, and you look at the Canadian election study, which came out that did a very extensive polling with the very high level of, with very large sample sizes, and it found a very similar result. So at the end of the day, I think the reason why my policies have been so popular with women is because, you know, they're common sense. Women are struggling with affordability. They're facing crime problems in their communities. They want to be able to live safely and affordably in a country where their hard work is rewarded. And they haven't actually gotten any of those things from the Liberal Party. And I think the fact that I presented a positive agenda in the last election to solve those problems was probably the reason why we did so well with women and men on the ballot.
Your memory recall is off the charts. Do you think you get enough credit for that?
I have no idea. I've never thought of my memory as being especially good.
What do you think makes you a strong leader in this role? Like there's a lot of skills people can bring to the table. Your memory recall has to be one of those, right?
I don't know. You're the first person that's ever said that. I have a tendency to...
You do it in the House of Commons all the time. You're rattling them off. I'm watching Liberal MPs reading, their hands shaking while they're trying to read off of a piece of paper, and you're just running it off the top of your head.
Well, if only I could remember where I left my phone, or remember to pick my socks up. My wife has to remind me to do those sorts of things sometimes. So I don't know. I guess when I read and study things, there are certain facts that fascinate me that are probably mind-numbingly boring to normal people, and so those facts remain resident in my mind.
Do you believe there should be public disclosure or a formal investigation into whether anything was offered, positions, promises, incentives, or future opportunities in exchange for the individuals who flew across?
I think it's going to be very hard to find out exactly what motivated it, but at the end of the day, these people ran on the Conservative platform. They ran under my leadership, and nothing has changed since the election that should give them any reason to believe differently than they did when the people voted for them. And in all of the cases, they all got more votes under my leadership than they had in prior elections, or that that our party had in their riding in the prior election. So they ultimately betrayed the people that voted for them, and I think they will be held accountable. I think there should be a law allowing people to petition for the resignation of members of Parliament who cross the floor. And then that would be one way for the constituents to hold accountable those who make that decision.
I just don't see how you can't see it as a betrayal, and I am blown away by the response that people have tried to point it at you, because at this point there's been so many, and it's completely goes against all the values they claimed to have had, that I don't see how it isn't necessary to really dig into this, because I think that those voters in those areas feel betrayed. I think the country feels a bit betrayed, and now you're seeing the outcome of this majority that I think was illegitimately gotten, and Canadians are now starting to feel betrayed. And I don't think that we'll see the reaction to that when the bills are passed. I think once they start to be implemented, people will become more aware of the negative impacts to them.
Look, I think we're in a funny phase where people are judging Carney on his announcements and his promises and his perceived intentions, not on his actual results. And what I think our biggest political challenge right now is to ask people, how's your life going after a year and a half of Mark Carney? Are your groceries more affordable? Is your paycheck outgrowing your mortgage payment? Can your kids move out of the basement? Is your job more or less secure? Is your neighborhood safer than it was before Carney and the Liberal government? And when you ask people that, they overwhelmingly say no. But unfortunately, the Liberals and the media have created a false illusion around Carney about the things he will do somewhere down the road. And he's being judged on that illusion rather than on people's real life experience. So my job is actually to force a collision between reality and the illusion of Mark Carney. And I think when that illusion happens, people will feel justifiably disappointed with what they got compared to what they were promised.
You asked him multiple times in the House of Commons if we were in a technical recession or a real recession. And to just pull back the curtain, did you expect him not to answer that question? What is behind the scenes when you leave that room after he's not answered that question and people tiptoed around it and avoided it? What does that tell you? What are your takeaways? Did you know he wasn't going to answer when you went in?
What it tells me is that he's very wise not to attend question period very often, because it's the only place he faces any tough questions. And he's been very good throughout his adult life at avoiding tough questions, going to places where people throw rose petals at him. And as soon as he's confronted with hard, factual questions, he crumbles and he performs very badly. You know, I asked him about a lady who was working full-time, having to live on a friend's couch, and he got up and told us a ridiculous, conceited joke about my birthday, which was an insult to her, not to me. You know, he stood up in the House and said that affordability is the best that it's been in a decade. And no one in Canada believes that. But that's the insight we get into his real capabilities when you ask him tough questions and he's not protected by an entire cocoon of media and interest groups. And so that's why he's missed 100 question periods in a year. He's got the worst performance turnout of...
and Justin Trudeau's was bad.
Well, Justin's was bad, but nowhere near as bad as Carney's. And in fact, Justin, to his credit, would stand up and answer every single question on Wednesdays. All, I think it was from us, 20 or 30.
Trudeau was maybe trying too hard
questions in a row. It's actually, got to give him credit for the endurance of that. Carney shows up once a week and answers 6 questions and then sits there quietly while he lets his backbenchers do the job for him. But the reason for that is that the image does not stand up to scrutiny. The illusion of Mark Carney is far superior to the reality of Mark Carney. And so it is, for me, the frustration is how quickly can we bring reality to that illusion so that Canadians can get on with fixing the problems that he and the Liberal Party have caused.
One of my biggest beliefs is that he's right now managing democracy rather than participating in it. Because you say 35 questions by Justin Trudeau, he deserves credit. I think 100 questions a day to the Prime Minister of Canada is not unreasonable, and we need to remember that as we go through these things. What would you do to address this technical recession?
So, look, I think, first of all, I don't think it's a technical recession. I think it's a recession. And it's not, you know, people say, well, you can't just measure 2 back-to-back negative quarters. Okay, fine. Let's use other measurements. You've got 3 out of the last 4 quarters, the economy has shrunk. We've had 5 consecutive quarters of declining investment. We have the second highest unemployment in the G7, the highest household debt in the G7. Look at some of the more human indicators, like the massive increase in food bank demand. We've had a quarter of our food banks last year ran out of food while there were still ongoing demands. Can you imagine people showing up at the food bank and then saying, sorry, we've got nothing left? That's never happened before. So I think we've really been in a recession for the last 10 years. It was masked by large-scale immigration, which inflated economic activity just because there were more humans transacting in the economy. Even though each one of those humans was poorer than they were before. And now, because immigration is not as large as it was under Trudeau, they no longer have the camouflage to hide the recession. But you know, at the end of the day, we need to get the government out of the way and off the backs of the Canadian people. How would I reverse the recession? I would eliminate the capital gains tax on reinvestments in Canada. Anybody who reinvests their gains here should be able to do so tax-free. They'll pay tax one day down the road when they finally cash out. But in the meantime, why not let them roll it over and grow faster? I would unblock our resources with the fastest permits anywhere in the OECD. I would cut the cost and size of government. We'd get rid of 25% of the regulations. In Ottawa, I'd incentivize the municipalities to speed up home building permits, because that's a big part of our economy. If you could get those permits moving, you get people swinging hammers and building in a tariff-proof industry like housing. I would cut income taxes to incentivize work, and those things would all be rocket fuel for our economy.
Fascinating. You've said you would get a pipeline built. Under your leadership, how long would it realistically take before Canadians saw a major new pipeline approved, under construction, and complete?
So approved, I want to get to 6-month permitting. So within 6 months of getting an application, there should be a decision. Under construction, it would depend on private industry, but I believe these things are so profitable that you could get a construction underway within 7 or 8 months of having a permit. So that just takes you to just over a year. I would not have the government build pipelines. I don't think the government should have to build these projects. The government needs to get out of the way so that private industry can build these wildly profitable projects. And the reason why government has had to build them lately is because we have to subsidize our way over the wall of red tape that the government creates. So, you look at the Trans Mountain Pipeline. There was a private proponent that was prepared to do it without any tax dollars, but they came to believe that you can't build anything in Canada. So they sold the project to the government and then took the money we paid them and spent it in Texas without any Texas tax dollars building things there. That's the wrong model, why not get out of the way and let businesses build pipelines and then ultimately make them pay taxes into the system?
Private engineer are better than a civil engineer.
Projects that government blocks, weighs down, or slows down, and then taxpayers having to bail them out. You can't build an economy on carve-outs, bailouts, and handouts. You have to build it on productive private sector investment. And that's how I would get things. That's the kind of project I would get built in Canada.
You're not wrong. I mean, I speak to industry privately, and they say British Columbia is one of the least competitive markets they operate in North America, which is just shocking. I
talked to one VC investor who, I won't name him because he hasn't given me permission, but he's probably one of the most famous British Columbia businessmen of all time. And he was going to build a strip mall a shopping center in British Columbia and one in Texas at the same time. And he said in Texas they had permits in 7 weeks. In Canada it took 7 years. And exactly the same specs. There was no environmental problems on either side of the border. But he said he flew down to Texas and he was greeted by the mayor of the town who said, what do we need to do? They opened up the blueprint, got him the permit. 7 weeks he was off swinging hammers and turning sod. And here in British Columbia it was 7 years. So it's not hard to imagine why $1 trillion is left when you can't get things built in Canada. We've got to get the government out of the way and let builders build.
If you became Prime Minister, how long do you think it would take for young Canadians before they could realistically start entering the housing market again?
I think within a term in office it's reasonable and realistic to expect that home ownership would normalize again for young people. That's the way it was before this government, right? It was absolutely normal for people in their mid-20s to make down payments and own homes. And it was absolutely normal to have mortgages completely paid off by the time people were in their early 40s. That was normal. Now, it takes longer to get a down payment than it used to take to pay off the whole mortgage. So we have no excuse for expensive housing. Like if we lived in Hong Kong or Singapore, you'd say, look, there's just no land. Where do you want us to build? But in Canada, we have nothing but land. Like we have more land per capita than any other developed country in the world, and much of it within 100 kilometers of the U.S. border where our population is congregated, and much of it around big cities. Even when you drive around big cities, you see tremendous amounts of unused brown land with tumbleweed. It's not ecologically special. It's just sitting there waiting for a permit or a zoning change. And so if we could, and we've got hundreds of thousands of federal acres of land that again are not ecologically sensitive, that are just sitting around doing nothing because it's next to impossible for business to get in and start building there. So if we could unlock that land, then we can unlock home ownership for our young people.
There's another piece to this home ownership, and I just interviewed Lyman Stone, who's a demographer focused on why the West is having less children, broadly speaking, why they're getting married less. And one of the key pieces he pointed out was when you have public parks, but when you don't have a police presence, people aren't willing to see those parks as useful because they don't feel like they could bring their children there. And that he's seeing that across Canada, that because parks are being used by people who are homeless and addiction, that people aren't able to build that same sense of community. How would you go about addressing that so young people can start to build families?
Well, I drove through East Hastings on the way here, and it's incredible how much misery and suffering goes on in those places. And yes, in some cases, that misery has made its way into playgrounds and parks. There are, parks in places like Nanaimo and in Toronto where they've been taken over by homeless encampments, and almost as you drive down the street, you can see very clearly what's going on. It's fentanyl or meth. So it's drugs, and the entire approach to drugs of the last 15 years by the Liberal and NDP governments has been not only ineffective, it has been almost seemingly deliberately counterproductive. Like they're making it harder for people to get off drugs and easier for them to get on it. And I would say this is a top-down, government-created problem. I met a young man here in British Columbia who had beat his drug addiction, and then he had become homeless for unrelated reasons. He went into a government hotel that government had rented for homeless people, and within a few minutes he had a knock on the door from a drug dealer, and there he was restarted again on his drug addiction. So in government housing, he got back on drugs and his life went backwards. They've been giving out hydromorphone and other so-called safe forms of opioids that addicts then sell to kids in order to be able to buy fentanyl and other harder drugs. They've effectively legalized possession, which means police can't stop someone from carrying around deadly doses of fentanyl. And all of that has given us among the biggest drug overdose crises anywhere in the developed world. I would reverse all of that, by the way. I would bring in a hard ban on fentanyl, meth, heroin, cocaine, crack, with the capacity for police to arrest people for possession and for judges to sentence them to treatment and recovery. I would bring in mandatory treatment and recovery and drug testing in our prisons and make it a condition of release, of earned release, that people whose crimes are linked to addiction actually have to become drug-free in order to get released from prison. I would replace all these consumption sites with treatment centers, with the goal being abstinence, getting people completely off drugs. Now you might say, well, is that really such a revolutionary policy? Unfortunately, the answer is yes. Right now, it is not the stated policy of many public health agencies to get people off drugs. It is to keep them using drugs in a way the government considers to be safe. Like, if you ask a lot of public health officials, they will tell you that their goal is not to get people off drugs. It's to continue their drug habit in
This is
a
crazy.
healthier way. But there is no healthy way to addiction with these drugs. There is no healthy future. You're playing Russian roulette. You're going to die if you keep using these things. And the problem is that we have not been willing to tell the truth. The only way to save someone's life from a fentanyl addiction is to get them off fentanyl for good, and not to replace it with another opioid, but to get them off the drug altogether. And it's possible. There are incredible treatment facilities across this country that operate on the goal of abstinence, and it works. They get on their feet, they get jobs, they support their communities, and they're better. And that would bring safety to the parks that you're asking about.
A lot there. First, I'll say I worked as a native court worker for 5 years, trying to support people through those circumstances. And the big takeaway I had was I was in a revolving door system, which is the whole reason I went to law school, ran for council, ran for chief, was because I wasn't able to address any of these deep problems. And the only other person I wanted to mention was Alia Warbus, who's serving as a Conservative MLA here in British Columbia. She had shared a harrowing story where she was in Alberta struggling with drug use, and the hospital was mandated to keep her there until until she was clean and off of those drugs. And she had said had she been in British Columbia, she would have likely died because they would have just let her out before she had become clean and likely gone back to using. And so these policies on a really deep level impact whether or not people live, but also whether or not we see the greatest gifts of our population. And the idea that the kind thing to do to people is to let them live on the streets, I think is just such a tragic, mean mindset to do to people, because they don't want to be there. I've never met a homeless person or a person in addiction who wants to be in that circumstance and just wants it to be normalized so that they can continue. They have harrowing stories of not being able to see their children, not being able to have the career that they had thought they had. And I often in my community think about how I've been given this immense privilege to try and support that, because so many people get stuck because of where they were born, who they were born to, and not being able to share their gifts, their identity, who they want to become. Like in First Nation communities, the odds you're going to have a next door neighbor that's a doctor, lawyer, judge, is so unlikely that you can't even aspire to those types of jobs. And that's why we need to address so many of these issues. On the Indigenous file, I know that you're here in part to talk about private property rights. You've spoken before about private property rights and protections for Canadians from government overreach. With the Cowichan decision in British Columbia and now the Wolastoqey in New Brunswick, sorry, I'm not from that territory, I don't know that word very well, courts are now wrestling with whether Aboriginal title can coexist with privately held fee simple land. What is your position?
My position is that fee simple must take priority. Once it is granted, then it must be final. And I believe that the government of Canada needs to argue in the forthcoming appeal of the Cowichan decision in favor of the principle of extinguishment, which is that fee simple title extinguishes all other claims on a piece of land. The problem with the contrary approach, which is what the court found, is that it puts in risk the title of, at first, 800 acres of land in Richmond, British Columbia, worth $1 billion. But if the precedence applies, then it could put into risk basically all the home ownership in the province of British Columbia, because other tribes could simply say, well, there's now a precedent that the Cowichan Aboriginal title supersedes private property rights of Richmond residents. Well, then the claims across the Lower Mainland, which are overlapping and numerous, could do exactly the same thing. So then you could have literally millions of British Columbians dispossessed of homes that they legitimately bought. They paid they paid extraordinary amounts of money, because of course it's the most expensive real estate market in North America. So imagine you bought a $1.2 million house with a $1 million mortgage, and you and your wife are working nonstop to pay down that mortgage, and someone comes along and says this property might not be yours. You still have the mortgage, by the way. I don't know how you're going to pay that off. I think this risks bringing absolute economic chaos to our entire economy. And the Liberal government in Ottawa, along with the NDP government in BC, have refused to make the argument that fee simple takes priority over other claims. And as a result, we're in this incredible mess. So we're fighting hard every day to defend property rights, and because if we don't, we have no economy left.
I've heard you advocate as well for the Castle Doctrine, and I think it's fair to say in a capitalist system, in a free market, private property is one of the fundamental pieces. Would you like to see constitutional reform on that front?
Well, I think we'd all love to, but I'm not proposing to open the Constitution at this time. So I would like, because the reason is that the Constitution can be a can of worms. We all know that. That's the Canadian history. It's not controversial to point out. We saw Meech and Charlottetown kind of seize the national debate for well over a year apiece. We need to focus on restoring affordability, fighting crime, home ownership, all that other stuff. So I think the first step should be to win this in court. But if that is not possible, we're going to have to look at other legal and constitutional options, because prolonged uncertainty about private property could cripple our economy and our investment. So, you know, what I've got right now is a task force headed up by Taco Van Popta, who's not only a member of Parliament from the Lower Mainland, but also someone who is an expert on land title as a former commercial real estate lawyer. And he's going to be coming up with options that are legal, parliamentary, and constitutional, depending on how the appeals in these cases proceed. But one way or another, we have to protect private property or we don't have an economy.
One of my biggest concerns that I've been doing my best to try and help bring the temperature down on is the relationship between First Nations and everyday Canadians, because we have more and more flashpoints. We have Alberta separatism, where we just had the treaty chiefs come out and say they want an investigation into Premier Daniel Smith. We have new pipelines proposed where coastal First Nations are saying that they're against it. We have the unmarked graves controversy in Kamloops, and private property rights in question with the Cowichan decision. And I'm just wondering, how do we try and address a lot of these issues without anti-Indigenous sentiment, but also by remembering, to me, reconciliation was always about two groups coming back together, resolving the issue so we can be one, so we can see ourselves in the flag, so that we can work together on a lot of these issues. And I have a suspicion we will end up there in the end, because when we talk about the economic challenges, it's primarily minority communities like First Nation communities who need economic development in order to see investment in their communities or in order to address their poverty. So I think they're likely going to get there eventually and understand that we do need economic growth. We do need pipelines in order to address this. But how do we make sure that we don't end up farther apart by the end of this than...
First of all, I think we have to recognize that there are non-Indigenous lawyers, lobbyists, bureaucrats, and politicians who thrive on keeping us divided. And, you know, they doubled the size of the bureaucracy, the Indigenous Affairs bureaucracy, the departments in Ottawa, and tripled the budget. And much of that has just gone to, again, lawyers, lobbyists, bureaucracy, and other things that don't actually help Indigenous people on the ground. And there's a vested interest in keeping disputes going and preventing solutions from coming forward. So I think those of us who want to move the country forward need to focus on what we have as common ground. So you mentioned a bunch of things. So let's look at resource development. Like, I think that the Indigenous people of Canada can be the richest people in the world as a result of resource development. You look at, for example, LNG Canada and the Coastal Gas Link. It was unanimously supported by the elected community leaders across the entire path of the pipeline and ultimately at Kitimat, where the liquefaction facility is. That is the single biggest infrastructure project in Canadian history, spearheaded by Ellis Ross, a former First Councillor of the Haisla First Nation and a Conservative Member of Parliament. You look at Billy Morin, his community in the Enoch Cree in Alberta has gone from 20% unemployment to like 3% unemployment, where he balanced his budget as a chief. And ultimately, that is at least indirectly the result of resource development, as everything is in the Alberta economy. And then you look at some of the other values that Indigenous people have that are very, very conservative. Family values, belief in a creator, freedom, hunting, and the right to responsibly use firearms. These are all commonalities that conservatives have with First Nations, and I've tried to build bridges with First Nations communities on those grounds. And that's why we were very proud to bring in numerous First Nations people to be elected as Conservative MPs in my caucus, whom I've mentioned. It's also one of the reasons why, according to the Canada Election Study, Indigenous people voted Conservative in the last election, that might be the first time we've won so handily, and I was very proud of that. And so I want people in First Nations communities to understand that when we fight for property rights, it's not at detriment or against the First Nations people. That's not our goal. Rather, it's for all of us to prosper in a property-owning, free market economy, and that has to be inclusive of everyone.
I have two more questions for you. I recently spoke with investigative journalist Sam Cooper about foreign interference, transnational repression, fentanyl, hostile state networks, and organized crime. His concern is that Canada does not have a strong enough legal tool to target these networks at a system level. Do you think Canada needs something like a Canadian RICO Act to go after the leaders, financing, and networks behind these threats?
We do need much stronger laws and capacity to break up these transnational syndicates that are carrying out crime and violence on our streets. It starts with better vetting of those who come into our country. We've had, for example, the Bishnoi gang. The Liberals basically opened the door and said, come on in. And you've got a guy, this Bishnoi guy, living in a prison in India, running remote control, a terrorist group and organized criminal enterprise in Canada from an Indian prison. But how the hell does that happen? You know, how is it that our government can't interrupt that? It's incredible. They should be kicked out of our country. Then you've got the IRGC. There's at least 700 IRGC agents in this country, according to a very extensive study that Global News reported on. And why the hell are they not kicked out? How is it that researchers can identify these people? They're visitors. They're not even citizens, visiting our country on extended visas, organizing terrorism, hate. They're threatening the Iranian diaspora population. Just last week, we got a report that that multiple shootings in Canada have been funded and instigated by the Iranian government. We should be deporting any visitor associated with these groups, vetting them before they come in, setting up a foreign agent registry, which is already passed into law, but for some reason Mark Carney doesn't want to implement it, and kick the people out of our country that are using this as a foreign interference playground and endangering the lives of our people in the process.
My last question, I have my only reflection on the 2025 election that I didn't like was the lack of interviews from members of parliament, the lack of participation across the board. All parties kind of participated in that and hunkered down and sent out key messaging. I believe many of our political leaders aren't humble enough. And they don't often seek direction from citizens on specific issues. They say, I got elected, so I've got this mandate, I can do whatever we like. We're somewhat seeing that with some of the bills being put forward by Mark Carney. Do you have any regrets or things you would have done differently that you can share with Canadians?
Yeah, I think we should do more interviews, and that's what I personally decided to do. I think I said about 3 or 4 months ago that my goal was to talk to everyone everywhere and reach the largest number of audiences. We made a decision to try and have a very disciplined day-to-day message target, try and pierce through. You know, today we're talking about affordability, let's talk only about affordability. Tomorrow we're talking about fighting crime, let's talk only about fighting crime. And the concern was if we're doing 5 interviews, long form, that you might say one thing that will take you off that news track. But I think in the modern media environment, it's more dynamic and less controlled. And so you need to talk to everybody everywhere across multiple platforms. Otherwise, your message just won't be heard. And like I said with this fellow I mentioned earlier in the interview, he saw my Bartlett Diary of the CEO interview. Was the first time in my 4 years as leader that he had heard my message. And hearing it once, he was convinced. Well, I wonder sometimes if I had done an interview like that before the election, might he have heard that interview before then? I met a guy who works at a mill, lumber mill in Thunder Bay, 32 years old, gave a speech at the cafeteria at their mill. And afterwards he said, oh my God, that was amazing. I'd never heard a political speech. I've never followed politics. And I was like, oh really? Do you mind if I ask who you voted for? He said, I didn't vote. I'd never heard of any of this. And I said, well, you agree with everything I said? He said, yes. And I always ask myself if him and another, say, 300,000 guys like him had heard my message before the election, might they have voted? And might that have made a difference? And I think the answer is yes. And that's why I've made the decision to do more interviews with more people across the spectrum, hostile and friendly, and everything in between.
Well, thank you for doing this. I'll close by just saying that, as I mentioned, I think one of your gifts is memory recall. And I think that you're not recognized enough for raising those individual stories. I was talking to my wife, who's sitting with us, about how you participate in democracy, because it can feel like, well, another election could be a couple years away, like what are we supposed to do? Reaching out to your political leaders, whether they're MLAs, MPs, or to the leader of the opposition, and saying, this is my struggle, these are my issues. They can't fix it tomorrow, but knowing that they carry it forward into the House of Commons, knowing that you've raised several people's stories here, can help people feel heard and can bring down the political temperature in the room and give people hope that all of this may be addressed over time, because it's when we stop thinking that our voice matters that democracy starts to die. And so I'm grateful you're willing to do this. I've seen you doing more. I thought your interview with Stephen Bartlett was fascinating. I'm a huge admirer of his work and your approach to doing more interviews, because I think more sunlight gives us that dichotomy that you're talking about. Mark Carney is unlikely to come sit on this podcast. He's unlikely to do long form.
Invite him anyway.
Absolutely.
I think it would be great if he did come and do a podcast like this and hear from a different point of view. And congratulations on all your success and leading your community at your age. How old are you now anyway?
30.
Holy smokes, you make me feel like an old man. I'm coming on 50. So you're doing incredible things. So I hope that you continue to enjoy your success and that your audience grows, because there's a lot of people who have to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Polyev, and huge thank you to all of the team here who helped put this all together. You have a tremendous team behind the scenes providing us with this amazing setup with all the resources we needed to make sure this all went well. So you should be very proud of the people you work
Thank
with.
you. I am.
Leader in the G7 to have plunged his economy into recession. He's been prime minister for 4 quarters now. The economy has shrunk in 3 of those quarters. He's the only G7 leader who can say that. The economy is smaller today than when Mark Carney became prime minister a year ago. He's the only G7 leader who can say that. He's been, Mark Carney will like to make excuses today. But let me ask him a question. But before I do, I'm going to actually quote back to him something he said to one of you. Mark Carney said to one of the journalists, "Rosie, look inside yourself." Well, I'm going to ask Mark Carney to look inside himself, and I'll ask him directly. Mr. Carney, if it really is global factors and tariffs that have given Canada the only recession in the G7, why have France, Italy, Japan, Germany, the United Kingdom, and the United States all avoided a recession? They all have the same tariffs and the same global factors, yet none of them, not one, is in recession. Only Mark Carney has the distinction of leading his country into a recession. Now, we know that there will be a lot of excuses today, but excuses will not put food on the dinner table of the 2.2 million people relying on food banks. Excuses will not get the jobs back for the 120,000 people who've lost them, as Canada has the second highest unemployment in the G7. Excuses will not allow a young couple to buy a home, as Mark Carney has given Canada the worst housing costs in the G7. Excuses will not help the mother who is tossing and turning in bed at night wondering how she will make her mortgage payment, as Mark Carney has made Canada the most indebted household, given Canada the most indebted households anywhere in the G7. And by the way, Mark Carney will claim that this is just technical. There's nothing technical about having an empty stomach because you can't afford paying the worst food inflation in the G7. There's nothing technical about coming home from work and telling your kids that you no longer have a job and that they're going to have to sell the house because Canada has the second highest unemployment in the G7. That is not technical, it is real. This is a full-blown liberal recession. And it's not just 1 or 2 little data points that cause this, my friends. It is one of many data points that we see today. For example, in the last few weeks alone, we have fact after fact showing that the liberal economy is collapsing. I'm going to quote from Equifax. Insolvency volumes have increased to levels not seen since 2009, up 19% year over year. Delinquency rates climbed 32% year over year. In the first quarter of this year, insolvency volumes hit a 17-year high, partly due to escalating financial strain on mortgage holders, and 1.5 million Canadians missed a minimum debt payment in the first 3 months of this year alone. Then there's the investment numbers, which came out just yesterday. They show that in the first 4 quarters under this Liberal Prime Minister, Canada saw $1.9 billion of investment flee. That's $20 billion more than entered our country. That's a net $20 billion leaving our country to build pipelines, mines, homes, bridges, technology in other countries for foreign businesses and foreign workers.
Shame.
Again, we cannot blame foreign factors for that because the other countries to which that investment fled are facing the same foreign factors. So no more excuses, please. We actually need results. Furthermore, we know that the Prime Minister is fond of doing illusions of action, but here is the core reality. After a year in office, what has really changed in our economic policy? Every anti-development law remains in place, C-69, C-48. He's increased the industrial carbon tax 6 times higher than it was when Justin Trudeau was in office. Home building has actually dropped,
Ouch.
and in many provinces, the GST still applies to that home building. He's renamed, not eliminated, renamed the consumer carbon tax. And there are 500 economic projects waiting, some of them for years, just to get through the Liberal bureaucracy permitting system. Now, we know what won't fix this. Dazzling speeches at the World Economic Forum, clever-sounding corporate buzzwords, signing fake and unenforceable MOUs in grand halls with stately backdrops. None of these things will reduce costs or boost growth. Announcing projects that were approved many years earlier, or making pie in the sky promises like he's going to double electricity production 25 years from now with no details on how. All of these things are illusions. They give the impression of action, but in reality, all of the policies of Justin Trudeau remain the same, or they have gotten worse. The deficit is doubled, spending is higher. The only spending that has not gone up is capital spending, precisely the opposite of what Mr. Carney promised. The only way out of this Liberal recession is to reverse the policies that caused it in the first place. And that is why we are calling for the Prime Minister to get back in the House of Commons next week and introduce a bill to reverse all of the economic policies his party has introduced over the last decade. We don't need more photo ops, more signing ceremonies, more discussion papers. We need to reverse the Liberal policies that have given Canada the only recession anywhere in the G7. Conservatives have put forward positive plans to unleash our growth, including a real plan to incentivize the Americans to sign on to tariff-free trade, eliminating capital gains tax on reinvestments in Canada, ending the industrial carbon tax, in fact, cutting taxes on work, energy, home building, and investment, making Canada the fastest place anywhere on earth to get a permit, the freest economy in which to trade, work, invest, and get a return. Let's restore the promises of this country where anybody who gets out of bed in the morning can find a terrific job. A job that gives them a great paycheck, that buys affordable food and homes, where our young people can afford to start a family, where our parents can afford to give their children the best start, where our seniors retire in peace and tranquility, and where our economy is truly independent, self-reliant, standing on its own 2 feet. That is the mission. Now, let's turn it into action. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now take questions from reporters. Please identify yourself and your outlet. 1 question each.
Ok, je peux commencer. Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Poiliev, Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada. C'est un article qui vient de tomber ce matin. Le Wall Street Journal rapporte que l'administration Trump veut que les véhicules couverts par l'ACO, donc avec des tarifs moindres ou exempts de tarifs, aient au moins 50% de contenu américain. Est-ce que c'est une demande acceptable d'après vous?
Non, j'ai déjà proposé un plan positif pour éliminer tous les tarifs douaniers sur les autos qui va obliger les producteurs de produire une auto aux États-Unis pour chaque qu'ils vendent aux États-Unis et une au Canada pour chacun qu'ils vendent au Canada. Comme ça, on va pouvoir augmenter la production d'automobiles dans nos deux pays massivement pour renverser les déficits commerciaux que les deux pays ont maintenant. Donc, c'est ça la seule façon qu'on va pouvoir éliminer les tarifs entre le Canada et les États-Unis. M. Carney a baissé les bras et il a fait rien. Il n'est pas à la table de négociation lorsque le Mexique est là. Et à cause du fait que M. Carney est absent, maintenant nous voyons des menaces plus dangereuses par rapport à notre secteur d'automobile. Il n'y a aucun futur pour notre secteur automobile sans un accès direct et sans tarif aux États-Unis. C'est pour ça que j'ai présenté un plan il y a à peu près 3 mois pour sauver le secteur automobile et en fait pour renverser le déclin qu'on a vu depuis 10 ans au Canada. M. Carney n'a absolument rien fait depuis ce temps-là, sauf que faire des grandes contradictions. Hier, il a dit qu'il veut faire, et je cite, « Make America » dans ses mots, « Great Again », après avoir dit qu'il voulait une rupture avec les États-Unis. Donc, c'est un autre grand échec pour Mark Carney. Et peut-être c'est l'une des raisons pour lesquelles le Canada a la seule récession parmi les pays du G7. Yes, well over 3 months.
Bro, Pierre Poliev got a good French, not gonna lie. I was like, what the fuck? He was speaking English and at some point, boop, he turned in French for some reason, but the name of the video is in English.
Months ago, I presented a plan for tariff-free auto trade with the United States. Bring back the 1965 Auto Pact, which would massively increase production in both Canada and the United States and actually achieve the stated goals of both countries. Since that time, Mark Carney has been nowhere and done nothing, while the Mexicans are at the negotiating table eating our lunch on auto negotiations. Mark Carney has not shown up for one negotiation so far. The result is that our auto sector is hemorrhaging jobs under his leadership. In the last 10 years, we've lost half of our auto production, and now we're losing even more. But because Mark Carney has done literally nothing to fight for tariff-free trade on autos over the last decade, we've lost even more auto jobs. And one of the facts that the Statistics Canada reported that led to us being the only country in the G7 in recession is the decline in the auto sector. Yesterday, Mark Carney gave a baffling, confusing, and contradictory speech in which he simultaneously said we need a rupture with the United States and that we need to make America, in his words, great again. So his elbows are up and down so fast, he's doing a rhetorical chicken dance while we lose our auto sector.
Hi, Mr. Poliev. Hi, Mr. Poliev. Rahim Ahmed from the National Post. Mr. Poliev, you said that you'll be campaigning across Alberta for United Canada. Can you give us an update on any visits that you have scheduled back home in the next few weeks? And are you open to debating folks like Keith Wilson and some of the other prominent Alberta separatists?
We will be back in my home province of Alberta to campaign for a united country. And our message is that all of Canada needs to wrap its arms around Alberta. Let's ensure that every Albertan knows that Canada loves Alberta, that Canada is Alberta, Alberta is Canada. We need to have a strong, united nation right across this country. And that will mean a stronger province of Alberta, but getting out of the way and off the backs of our energy sector, getting rid of the gun grab, locking up criminals to bring safety to our streets, allowing young Albertans to start families with affordable homes, decentralizing control in the country so that Albertans have more direct decision-making power within their provincial boundaries. That is a positive, optimistic, unifying vision that I will be presenting to all Albertans in all corners of the province.
Monsieur Poliev,
Le ministre chinois des Affaires étrangères est en ville aujourd'hui. Il a dit ce matin à Anita Anand, la ministre canadienne, que si le momentum continue, les échanges commerciaux pourraient augmenter de plus de 100% d'ici 5 ans et que le marché chinois demeurait ouvert au Canada et qu'il deviendrait bientôt le plus grand marché mondial. Comment pensez-vous que ça sera reçu aux États-Unis? Quel est le risque aussi au Canada?
Mais tout d'abord, M. Carney est directement dans un conflit d'intérêts. Lui qui est allé en Chine pour recevoir un prêt de 200 millions de dollars d'une banque contrôlée par l'État chinoise quelques mois avant son entrée en pouvoir. Il a toujours des investissements à Brookfield qui veut élargir ses affaires en Chine. Il a déjà permis Brookfield d'être à la table des discussions et pourparlers en représentant le Canada. Ça n'a jamais été arrivé qu'un premier ministre envoie son entreprise pour faire des pourparlers. On veut un premier ministre qui défend les intérêts du Canada et non pas de son entreprise. Évidemment, dire qu'on peut on peut remplacer les États-Unis avec la Chine, ce n'est pas réaliste quand on vend 20 fois plus aux États-Unis qu'on vend à la Chine. Et c'est peut-être l'une des raisons pour laquelle le Canada est le seul pays en récession parmi les pays du G7. C'est un autre mauvais calcul de Mark Carney. Un homme qui a tort sur toutes les questions économiques depuis une décennie. Il avait tort sur la taxe carbone, sur les plans de garder tout le pétrole dans la terre, son opposition au pipeline, son support pour l'impression monétaire. Il a tort sur toutes les questions économiques depuis une décennie et on voit qu'il a tort encore sur les questions mondiales. Yeah. Of course not. He won't do anything to make Beijing unhappy. A year after Mark Carney said that China was the single biggest risk to Canada, he claimed that we were going to have a full rupture with the United States in favor of a strategic partnership for a new world order with the dictatorship in Beijing. Of course, Mr. Carney's in a terrible conflict of interest. He went and got a $200 million loan for his company from a state-backed Chinese bank while he was the economic advisor to Justin Trudeau. That loan is still owed, my understanding is, by Brookfield, which the Prime Minister continues to be invested in. He allowed Brookfield to be at the table for discussions. So Mr. Carney has got to be clear that he should represent Canada's interests, not his corporation's interests. We want, and maybe one of the reasons why Canada is the only G7 country in recession right now is because he is miscalculating on trade just like everything else. He's been wrong on every economic question over the last decade, and Canadians are paying the price. He was wrong on carbon taxes, wrong on keeping half our oil in the ground, wrong to oppose a pipeline to the Pacific, wrong to support money printing inflation, and now he's wrong in his trade priorities. We sell 20 times more to the United States than we sell to China. That's just a mathematical fact. And Mark Carney's Brookfield interests in China won't change that. We need a prime minister who's fighting for our workers in this country. We should have the best economy in the G7, not the worst.
Sorry, Mr. Polyev, just to jump back to the economy real quick. In Q3 2025, the economy grew at an annualized rate by 2.6%. We have economists saying that today's numbers are so nominal they could be forecasted away and revised away. So aren't you jumping the gun a little bit, calling this a full-blown recession?
Right. So I know that there's a lot of excuses being made for Mark Carney today, and I'm not surprised. By the way, which outlet are you with?
Is 2.6% economy growth an excuse, or is that just the number?
It's actually, there's no 2.6% economic growth. The economy, if I could. So you're having to go back? How many quarters are you having to go back now?
2 quarters.
So you're having to go back. Okay, so let's get this straight. There's been 4 quarters since Mark Carney became Prime Minister. The economy shrunk in 3 of those 4 quarters. Canada is the only G7 country for which that is the case. There's now been an entire year of Mark Carney that is recorded in economic data, and the GDP is smaller today than when he took office. That is only true of Canada among G7 countries. And now there are 2 back-to-back quarters where the economy shrunk, which is the literal definition of a recession.
I got to
Canada,
go. I'm gonna be
by the
back.
way,